This week's episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Found Penny Studio. Found Penny Studio is exclusively fulfilling our Patreon Tier 3 merchandise perk by doing what they do best, creating to celebrate everyday moments like your favorite TV series. Check out Found Penny Studio's creations at foundpennystudio.com and find Couch Potatoes Unite on Patreon at www.patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch Potatoes Unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
CPU Mailbag!
It's time to open the CPU Mailbag! The Mailbag is available to all tier levels of our Patreon. In Mailbag, a subscriber can ask a question that we will answer in this Mailbag segment, which will appear in some of our episodes. Though we try to be responsive in other ways too, this is when we make it go super public. We couldn't do this without the support of loyal listeners and patrons, and we want to acknowledge it in this way. It's the least we can do. Today's mailbag features a question from Patreon subscriber Josh. He said, quote, I'd like to know how many streaming services, or OTA, cable, other content sources, panelists pay for and how much pass around there is. Incidentally, he dropped this note via our Discord, which is also available to all Patreon tiers. If you want to join the conversation, find us on Patreon. Well, Josh, let me start by saying that I get where you're going with this. After all, it's no secret that so many of our couch potatoes are related and interrelated, and many of them knew me, the chief couch potato Kylie, either to start or their friends or friends of friends who have joined since the podcast's inception. To answer your question, though, we surveyed our top 20 panelists, and these are the results. 100% of our top 20 panelists, i.e. those involved in the most panels and episodes, engage in some streaming activity of some type. 25% of them augment their streaming with cable or vice versa. 100% of the panelists pay for their streaming or share it with members of their household. 10% swap services with close friends who are not couch potatoes, and only 5% of the top 20 couch potatoes share streaming with each other. And there you have it. Hey, we're serious TV watchers, and we're prepared to stand by that notion with our respective wallets. Of course, the TV landscape is constantly changing. Ask us this question again in a year and see where we are then. Thank you for the question, Josh, and for subscribing to our Patreon. We couldn't do this without you. If you want us to answer a question in our mailbag segment, subscribe to our Patreon found at www.patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite. For now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because we want you to say it. Say our name. Sometimes these jokes write themselves. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panels and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the website or the podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon Music to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, Supernatural, Orange is the New Black, Gotham, the Marvel shows on Netflix, Stranger Things, iZombie, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, The Good Place, The Crown, Game of Thrones, American Horror Story, Grace and Frankie, Mr. Robot, Charmed, and Riverdale. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Altered Carbon, Doctor Who, Schitt's Creek, Westworld, Fuller House, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Will and Grace, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We'll be launching new panels covering This Is Us, The Orville, Big Little Lies, The Good Doctor, Call the Midwife, and The Animaniacs. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap. We'll thank the Golden Girls for being friends, and we'll cry bazinga for Big Bang Theory. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in these semi-quarantine times. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, YouTube channel, Apple iTunes channel, Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, not the physically rough kind, though. You better toe the line. Today's panel and I are continuing a new Looking Back series, as requested by several of our resident Couch Potatoes and Couch Potatoes adjacent. If you aren't already aware, from time to time, CPU chooses shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about, and to consider whether or not they age gracefully, like Gus Fring on An Average Business Day, or don't hold up as well, like Walter White on An Average Business Day, because I think we can agree he has some ups and downs. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes wherein we review a show that has been gone, either by a natural end or cancellation, for some time. And this is but one chapter in a multi-part series in which we will explore all shows in one multi-show universe, specifically the entire universe spawned by the show Breaking Bad. In fact, today, in our second discussion, we'll move forward with our look back at one of the most critically acclaimed and popularly watched dramas of all time, a program which spawned a prequel and a sequel film, and therefore our series today, which we call Breaking Better. Today, in the second episode of our series, we'll be discussing seasons 4 and 5, including the series finale of the titular drama itself, Breaking Bad. We've already discussed seasons 1 through 3 in the first episode of this series. Each subsequent episode in this new CPU podcast universe will progress through the aforementioned prequel, Better Call Saul, and the sequel movie produced by Netflix last year entitled El Camino. Furthermore, I will be splitting moderation duties with one of our panelists, though as things often work around here, yours truly, your friendly neighborhood Chief Couch Potato, and the operations Chief Cook, you heard me, is doing the breaking half of this Breaking Better series. Also, at various points in this mega series, we'll present top 5 best and bottom 5 worst episode lists around various themes chosen by the moderator in question, as we tend to do with our retrospective series. We can't get started without a tiny bit of plot summary and praise, though, so to remind the listener, Breaking Bad is an American neo-Western crime drama television series created and produced by Vince Gilligan. The show aired on AMC from 2008 to 2013 for 5 seasons and a total of 62 episodes. It was set and filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and tells the story of Walter White, played by Bryan Cranston, an underemployed and dispirited high school chemistry teacher who is struggling with the recent diagnosis of stage 3 lung cancer. White turns to a life of crime, partnering with his former student Jesse Pinkman, played by Aaron Paul, by producing and distributing crystallized methamphetamine to secure his family's financial future before he dies, while navigating the dangers of the criminal underworld. The title is a Southern colloquialism meaning to turn to a life of crime. Gilligan characterized the series as showing Walter's transformation from a soft-spoken Mr. Chips into Scarface. To wit, Walter White is a meek high school science teacher who transforms into a ruthless player in the local meth drug trade, driven by a desire to provide for his family after being diagnosed with the lung cancer. Initially making only small batches of meth with his former student Jesse in a rolling meth lab, Walter and Jesse eventually expand to make larger batches of a special blue meth that is incredibly pure and creates high demand. Walter takes on the name Heisenberg to mask his identity. Because of his drug-related activities, Walter eventually finds himself at odds with his family, the Drug Enforcement Administration through his brother-in-law Hank Schrader, played by Dean Norris, the local gangs, and the Mexican drug cartels and their regional distributors, putting his life at risk. Among the show's co-stars are Anna Gunn and R.J. Mitty as Walter's wife Skylar and son Walter Jr., and Betsy Brandt as Skylar's sister Marie Schrader. Others include Bob Odenkirk as White and Pinkman's sleazy lawyer Saul Goodman, Jonathan Banks as private investigator and fixer Mike Ehrmantraut, and Giancarlo Esposito as drug kingpin Gus Fring. Today, in part 2 of our multi-part Breaking Better series, our supersized crew of Breakers of Bad, namely Nick, Kyle, Hillary, Julianne, Nate, and Devin, return to talk about the finer and less fine points of all seasons of Breaking Bad. In this episode, we will be focusing specifically upon seasons 4 and 5 of Breaking Bad, and it should be noted that all of our panelists have viewed every episode, now that's true, of Breaking Bad, and may discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched Breaking Bad and plan to do so at some point, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. Welcome back, panel! How are you?
Great.
Great!
Yes.
What's up?
Hooray!
Okay, are you ready to break bad the last 2 seasons of Breaking Bad?
Oh, you have no idea. Just beyond ready.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Let's unpack.
The enthusiasm I feel is overflowing, so let's get to it. Before we get too far down the train of analyzing and dissecting the last 2 seasons of this drama, I do have to ask you to introduce yourselves by first name again, just first name, don't tell us everything, just your first name, and then we're going to take your temperature. So because we are looking back at Breaking Bad in a retrospective, in the first episode, I asked you to rank your interest in the show along the standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do, as to how you felt at the beginning or in the early parts of watching the show. Now, I need you to think about how you felt at the end of watching Breaking Bad, when it was all said and done and you had time to process your various emotions and thoughts. And the character question goes like this, because I've tweaked it quite a bit to match the last 2 seasons. Would you say at the end of Breaking Bad that you are practically obsessed with this show, in the sense that you can't look away, like at a car wreck, but a beautiful, rich car wreck full of untold millions of dollars and colorful supporting characters? Better Call Saul. What's more riveting than watching an otherwise upstanding high school chemistry teacher descend into the madness of the drug trade and related money laundering as he becomes more and more seduced by the thrill of illegal activity? You only wish that it would have lasted longer. At least there's an equally excellent prequel to enjoy now too, like Saul Goodman. The show is superb. How could it not be, since you only do business with the best? You're a professional and can recognize expert craftsmanship and entertainment when you see it, even when the presentation lacks a certain grace, so much so that when it's right, you're willing to make a sizable investment for what you expect to receive in dividends upon dividends. In your opinion, there are no greater dividends for a television viewer than those gained upon watching this series, no matter its perceived warts. And if there are warts of which to speak, you will be several steps ahead of the game in your defense of any of those perceived warts, ready with backup arguments to make, even if it kills you in the end to do so, like Gustavo or Gus Fring. You like the show a lot, even as the show is filled with characters of relative moral ambiguity with which you convince yourself you're okay at first, despite the fact that the self-convincing lacks wisdom and takes a tremendous amount of patience, causing you to fret and to question why you keep following such flawed characters when they only break your heart and land you mentally and emotionally, if not physically, in trouble in the end. To that end, this series breaks your heart more times than you normally would want from your television, but these reactions never deterred you from coming back for more, like Jesse Pinkman. You watched Breaking Bad because you felt you had no other choice, and though your reactions could be described as complicated at best, the show still got under your skin in ways you didn't expect, because the choice to watch, well, you did it all for you. You liked it, no matter what can be said about it. You were good at it. Watching the main characters' respective evolutions, or regressions in some case, made you feel more alive than you've ever felt, even if the show burned bright at first in your estimation before leaving too quickly. but at least it left as loudly and as spectacularly as it began, like Walter White. You think this show is decent? You suspect that others have overhyped it and that it's not the breakthrough that everyone thinks, but you at least appreciate how the show demonstrates that not everything or everyone operates in black and white terms, even if some behaviors or actions or choices would be seen as unquestionably wrong by a large section of society. You were thankful that some characters stayed constant no matter what horrors confronted them in the end, like Hank Schrader. This show has its moments of real wisdom and clarity, though often it feels messy, requiring the use of special services to clean up the mess. Still, you've kept an eye on it all these years because it's better than a hole in your eye and doesn't feel like a waste of time, even if it sometimes leaves you shaking your head in disbelief or like you've been left dead in a ditch somewhere, like Mike Ehrmantraut. You did not watch this show live and didn't know what to make of it at first, but you respected what people were saying about it and came to respect it and the character of Walter White quite a bit, even if you didn't always agree with the character choices. Of course, any disagreement you had ultimately meant you had different ideas about how you would conduct similar criminal activity, like Todd Alquist. You're not sure what to make of this show. You watch it, but you don't trust it. You want to love it, but can't believe what you're watching or why you think you should love it. You can't deny its effect on you, your family, and society. You know that it's excellent at what it does, but the truth is so horrible that no matter how much you try to rationalize it away, you feel guilty for even turning the damn show on, like Skylar White. You never really liked the show to begin with, though you must admit you had to keep watching it through to the end to see if the good guys would get the bad guys, especially at the point at which you made up your mind that Walt was the bad guy in question, because no one else made such shocking choices with such a profound effect on who you are as a person and on the family you love, because you and your family watched it together, like Marie Schrader. You came to the show late. You were sort of roped into it despite your protests. It's not your style or your usual cup of chamomile tea with soy milk and stevia. It's too out of the norm for you, even if your norm is illegal drug trafficking. Still, there were elements of the show that hooked you, though those same elements ultimately poisoned you or your mind in the end, like Lydia Rodart Quayle, or this show left you numb and full of rage. You can't believe that you were so misled for so long about what you were watching, and if anyone asks, you will say you hate it, no matter how much you loved it at first, like Walter White Jr., a.k.a. Flynn. Who would like to start?
My name is Devin.
Hi, Devin.
Very excited to be back on the panel, by the way.
Excited to have you back.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I love this show, so really excited to talk about it. My love for this show, same as the last episode, is still on the same level as Gus. I have a deep sense of respect for this show and the way it conducts itself, the way it orchestrates itself, and how it just very violently yet very naturally progresses its story. It forces so much on you, yet you feel like it's not unexpected.
All right, welcome back, Devin.
I'm Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Hillary will be talking after me probably. She's my wife and your sister.
That's
so
true. Great disclaiming, Kyle. I'm so proud of you.
That was so seamless.
Last time I said I was Saul, and I'm still going to stick with that. I almost feel like you tailored that description to me, since everyone knows I'm obsessed with this show.
You might have been floating in my mind a little bit.
I love this show. I've rewatched it more times than I can count. Every couple months I go back through. Better Call Saul is my favorite show of all time. I love this mythology and this world that they've created. I never get sick of it, and there's so many little things in every episode. So to me, it's a perfect show. It's flawless. I have nothing bad to say about it.
All right. Welcome back, Kyle, my brother-in-law.
And hi, I'm Hillary. He just mentioned me.
Hi, Hillary. He just mentioned me.
Okay. I am in the same spectrum. I am a mixture of Saul and Gus. We pretty much watched this show. We mentioned it in the last episode. We watched this show mostly in real time. And since its ending, which we watched in real time and experienced the emotions in real time, we both have gone back and revisited the series multiple times. And I probably would, I'm not one for, even though we do it a lot on the show, but me personally, I don't spend a lot of time ranking and listing things. But if I did, this show would probably fall onto one of the best shows of all time lists, easily. There's too much positive to say about, obviously, a very dark tale. but the way that they constructed the story, every single part of it is just pretty much, in my eyes, it's brilliant. So we'll get into that more, but I'm pretty much Saul and Gus.
All right. Welcome back, Hillary.
I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. It looks like you tweaked the Jesse Pinkman character, but I think it still applies for me. I do like this show a lot. It's not my type of show. It's really dark and really intense a lot, but it's so well made. I think Hillary even used the word perfect. Maybe Kyle did, but I believe it's one of, if not the best made shows from beginning to end. They just didn't leave loose ends, didn't take shortcuts. It's just so well made that I'm really glad I watched it. I enjoyed watching it, but like anytime I think of rewatching it, I have to like, is that the best choice for me? Probably not. Maybe I'll go back into rehab. But I guess you could maybe throw in a dash of Flynn, because some moments make me feel numb. But I'll stick with Jesse.
Okay. I was feeling a little, multiple personality-ish since Flynn's at the bottom.
Yeah.
He just really likes breakfast like Flynn.
Okay.
I do like breakfast.
It is the most important meal of the day.
And Dodge Challengers.
Dodge Challengers.
What do you mean? That's so you, Nick.
We'll explore his car preferences later. Welcome back, Nick.
Thanks.
This is Julianne.
Hi, Julianne.
Hello. So last time I was Saul with a mix of Jesse, and I would say that has pretty much remained the same. Definitely obsessed with this show. To me, this is just kind of a masterclass in telling of an anti-hero story, but it is definitely one of those shows that destroys me emotionally. So this is my second time watching the show all the way through. And the first time I ever watched it all the way through, I knew that I was going to have to watch it again, but I was going to have to prepare myself. How this came up in 2020, I mean, the timing is a little rough, but it's just such an exceptionally well done show that I know I'm going to have to revisit it again. But it's definitely heartbreaking. It takes a lot out of you to watch, I think.
All right. Welcome back, Julianne.
Thank you.
That leaves me.
It does.
Hi, I'm Nate.
Hi, Nate.
Last time I was Saul, and this time nothing's changed. I love it. I mean, I wrote a paper about it. For my English class. You can't say enough. Good. Everyone here has heaped its praise. I'm just shouting into the void with how great the show is.
All right. Welcome back, Nate. And of course, my name is Kylie. I both participate and moderate this panel, which is often the case. Last time, now, of course, just to clarify this up front, of the total 7 panel members here today, I am the only one of the 7 who just watched the show for the first time. So I just finished it for the first time yesterday, the day before recording. Last time I was both Gus and Jesse. I think I'm mainly Gus with a little bit of Jesse. This show is a great show. I think everybody has said it. I can't think of many TV shows that go off in the story that they are trying to tell as perfectly as this one does. I have I have almost no complaints about it, and the only thing that I would have to say is purely personal, which is it's very, 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 very dark, and was very, very, very emotionally wrecked at the end of it. But I knew what I was walking into. We'll talk about it. All I can say is that it's a superb show. Am I obsessed with it? I can't say I'm obsessed with it. I'm not Saul that way. But I appreciate every single facet of this show, and we're going to talk about why it's so good right now. So if you listen to the first episode in our retrospective series, you know that we are treating this like a retrospective, which is that we're taking a little bit deeper dive than our normal looking back, but less of a deep dive than an around the water cooler season by season kind of motif. We're going to talk about each season that we haven't talked about, so seasons 4 and 5 in turn. Then I've got some thematic questions we wanted to kind of cover because Breaking Bad is complex and complicated and kind of multi-layered in its storytelling, so I think we get to talk a little bit about that as well. And then, because it's a retrospective and it's one that has all the awards and accolades and fame and great heaps of praise, as Nate just described it, I asked our panelists to prepare top 5 and bottom 5 lists of their most favorite and least favorite episodes of Breaking Bad. And it should be interesting because I did some research on this, and there's some that tend to be consistent among a lot of different people, and then after that it's like, well, they're all good, it's kind of a crapshoot. So that's basically where we are. But let's start where we left off. Was the half measures full measures combo, and we start season 4 with the box cutter episode. That's not season 4?
No, it is.
Okay, we started with the box cutter episode, so essentially there's kind of a squaring off in the lab under the laundry. Gus is none too pleased, and Walt is trying to fight for not only his and Jesse's lives, but their continuation with the business. This is after Jesse has shot Gale Bedecker. Now I know his whole name because they repeated it many times. Gale Bedecker, he has died. He was going to be the backup chemist, but Jesse took good and darn care of that. And so season 4 begins. So let's talk about season 4. And any episodes that are stand out for you, not stand out, general, specific. Let's go.
I mean, I feel like we should just talk about the box cutter, at least the end of that episode, since it's one of the most jaw-dropping moments of the
God, yes.
So go ahead, Kyle.
I just love the moment he cuts Victor's throat, and all 3 of the people watching, even Mike, who's worked with him for years, jumps back and points his gun at him because none of them expected it. And like, I just remember watching it. It's like, you know something's going to happen, but he's just so cold. But you never expect that.
It's one of the many oh shh moments.
Right. Yes.
You're watching, I think the last time I said there's literally times where I watch this almost like it's like a spectator sport, and you're having like very, very vocal and visceral reaction to what's happening. That's one of those episodes. Definitely. I mean, and you already know because they're so good with the imagery anyway. I mean, the episode's called Box Cutter. The episode opens with a shot of the box cutter. And it's just, at that point, at least after the first couple seasons, you should already know that, I mean, it's going to go somewhere. But then you're still surprised and you're like, oh, crap.
And it's just such a great flip on the finale when Walt's being smug and thinks that he has one up on Gus. Because up until now, they know Gus is methodical and polite. They have no idea, though, his full potential, like how sadistic and cruel he can be.
It is, just businessman Gus is all.
Yeah.
He just looks like a cold businessman.
And then Walt is just so arrogant, thinking that, oh, I can kill this guy, and then Gus needs me, and he'll have to deal with it. And then they realize they've just created this whole new world of problems. Like, okay, they're fine for now, but it won't last.
They just got put on double secret probation.
Speaking of the moments, I would say that they generally come fast and furious more and more and more in these last 2 seasons. I mean,
I think I said that was going to happen.
Okay, Hillary,
I feel
down.
like time you're describing it as like a freight train, like just the way that this series goes, and I think seasons 4 and 5 is really where that kicks off.
Freight train with no brakes, and you're just,
Oh.
I had to watch, I was clutching a blanket a lot of the time, like, oh my God, what's happening? So, it was, Gus is, I think he might be my favorite character, which I don't know what that says about me. I really enjoy him because, first of all, Giancarlo Esposito is just a badass actor. I mean, everybody's great in this show, but there's something about him that he's so, like you said, Kyle, cold or cool even, compared to Walt's sort of simmering boil, Jesse's pure rage, Mike's like, who the hell cares, I just work here even though I sort of care kind of attitude. Gus is a completely different energy, and so when that stuff does happen, like in the box cutter episode, you're just like, You know you should be expecting it, and yet it still hits you like a ton of bricks because you can't believe your eyes are open watching it.
Well, yeah, the show sets it up for the audience like it does for Walt and Jesse. You don't know what you're going to expect out of him the entire time. I had an adjective in my head just a second ago of, the way that Gus essentially makes you feel. But that's essentially what it is. They do a really good job of putting you in that kind of first-person perspective, I think.
I mean, and really overall, especially like once you get into Saul, Gus is the central character of this entire world. Every single event that happens is kicked off between him and Hector Salamanca, and you're just thrown into the middle of it. You don't even realize you're in the middle of it. Even in season 4, you don't realize the repercussions and the dominoes quite yet. They're still building the world as you think it's headed towards the end. There's so much more you learn about these characters that just keeps adding to them like mythology. It's amazing.
Hermanos is not in my top 5, but if I had a top 10, it would be in my top 10, just because you finally kind of get a little bit of that backstory, and you figure out exactly how this all began. You're not given a lot of details, but you're given just enough, and how all of the different pieces start to interlock from a certain point. And even in that episode, I did not expect what happened in that episode to happen.
That episode is super important. I don't want to keep talking about Better Call Saul, but
no spoilers.
the entire plot of that show is centered around what happens in that episode, but they don't directly say it. So if you haven't seen Breaking Bad and you're watching Better Call Saul, you have no idea of the depths of how deep this goes. It's super important, and I think it elevates, because when I first saw it, I was like, oh, yay, a little tidbit of backstory. But everybody in that episode is super important. Don Eladio, Don Balsa, I mean, they are the main villains.
I'm talking about Better Call Saul.
Yeah, Kyle, you're moderating the series. Save it for when you moderate.
Well, what I was going to say in particular about Gus with this season is you really get the sense that Walt has stumbled into a world that he knew nothing about. And he really views Gus as almost like an equal, or in some sense, you get the feeling that he views him as an equal. But you get more of Gus's story in this. And Hermanos is the episode 2 where I believe he's questioned by the DEA.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And that whole scene is so interesting because you know that he's rehearsed this scene on his own 100 times. He's rehearsed this scene of being questioned by these DEA agents so many times that it's just so smooth, and he almost gets away with it. If Hank wasn't so good with his intuition. That's just a really interesting episode for Gus, I think.
Oh yeah, and you could see the seething rage in his face when he leaves the interview. How he goes from completely in control, but he hates the imposition so much because he knows he's so on top of things that this moment never should have happened. And then you can see he's building his rage towards Walt, that this indignity happened to him. And then it's almost worse than him.
Well, because Gus has his own intuition, and he knew this was going to be a very possible consequence of working with Walt to begin with. And so he's watching it unravel. I mean, he says multiple times, I'm not going to work with this individual. I see him as a liability. And How many times did you and I say that Gus and Jesse should have trusted their own instincts? A lot.
Very true.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons this show is so hard for me to watch is that I never know which character to root for. They're not you kind of are rooting for Walt the whole time, but he's come into Gus's world and is messing it up, but what Gus is doing isn't great either. So the show is just as difficult, but Gus is the perfect villain for the season too. That calm on this freight train, but I don't even know. It's so hard to talk about.
I actually would love to piggyback off of that because I was just thinking about that earlier. Really, who is my favorite character? And when I really analyze them all as human beings and the best of the evils in that world, I came to the conclusion that for me it was Mike, because Mike to me led the least destructive path out of anybody in that criminal circle. Yes, he killed a decent amount of people, but usually they were just bad guys or hitmen, and he never really did it when he didn't have to. He never intentionally really went out of his way too many times to get, like, serious hell-bent revenge on people. I thought he was, besides from Gus, definitely one of the most professional, if not the most professional out of all of them.
I think rooting for is tough, because I gotta tell you that when the path to Scarface finally clicked, but I think one of the most telling moments for me was when they reveal that Walt poisoned Brock with the Lily of the Valley, which was the season 4 finale. And I was like, oh man, here he is. He's a bastard. he did this to this kid. And then I reflected back on everybody else. I mean, I think you're right, Devin. Mike is probably the most practical of everybody. He's the most utilitarian in a sense, and he brings a lot of comic relief. I like Jonathan Banks a lot, and I can't wait to watch him in Better Call Saul again, because I generally enjoy Mike as a character. But if we're talking about sort of the sliding scale of who was the least evil of the evils,
Badger and Skinny Pete.
I know they're kind of, they're just there for drugs.
Math to addicts, and instead they start taking the program seriously.
I guess I never really saw them as evil, though. I guess I'm talking about, like, major players here, like the top dogs of that world. And Mike was definitely a big. But yeah, I mean, that is true. If we're strictly talking anyone who, like, got involved in just any drug trades with those guys or any affiliation with them, yeah, definitely Badger and Skinny Pete are angels in comparison.
Of the main players, I think if we're measuring it on how much sympathy you have for the character, I float back and forth between Jesse and Skyler. I actually now Skyler made choices, but so did Jesse, and it's like, in the count of choices, who's got the most bad choices? I don't know, I've lost count. But I have, my sympathies vacillate between the two of them, because as far as the wake of Walt's choices, they were the furthest dragged down, other than, of course, Hank, who, spoiler, loses his life in the end. So.
Yeah, that is a good point. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of the choices most of the choices that Jesse and Skyler make are just based off of their reactions and emotions from what is happening with Walt. So, and Jesse has, even the moment he shoots Gale, he
like breaks inside.
Yeah, it destroys him to a point. Which, so to me, clearly, even though he did it, and in his head he's still thinking he's doing it for the right reasons in the moment, I mean, he still knows that it's horrible. So Mike is practical. He's doing what he's got to do. But
yeah, like Mike and Saul, they're not evil. They're just businessmen, and if they can keep it as clean as they can, they will. They just want the money.
Yeah, that is for sure. That's for sure. Mike is a lot more principled than Saul, though. I'll give him that.
I got to agree.
Saul is more
talking about Breaking Bad.
I didn't say anything.
But I think we need to stop with the Walt bashing. This is
whatever.
2 seasons of a bunch of people just ripping on American hero Walter.
Anti-hero.
But,
let's say a straight up villain.
Inflammable. They mean this. Like, you really see Walt in a real fish out of water story here. In 2 seasons. Did not know what he was getting into when he got on board the Gus train. It's real hard for him. I feel for him, really. Takes his neck out for his friend Jesse time and time again.
That's one perspective.
Yeah, the child poisoning thing just kind of...
He wasn't really poisoned. He
was really poisoned. He
really poisoned
him. He's fine. He is still alive.
Yes, thanks to the medical professionals at the hospital they took him to, where they identified the poison.
They paid that bill, but Uncle Walt. Here. There is.
Keep in mind, Walt also had no idea where Hector would detonate that bomb, and he did not care how many other elderly people he took out.
Or
nurses.
There is that, too.
Hey, well, it's not like Theo was super social. It's not like he was going to be down there at the church sing-along in the activity center bopping a balloon with the rest of
The two other times we saw Gus visit Hector, it was in the main room with every single other person around them.
This is some real square dancing around the moral relativism over here.
He knew. It was all planned. It was ready.
This conversation makes me glad we're meeting via Zoom, Nate.
The doors are locked. We're going to play a game. Thanks for coming.
That's it. We're not moving forward. We're just sticking with this all night. Forward, go.
Yeah. So I don't agree with what you said, but it was funny.
Well, I was gonna say, if everything in the end Walt had said that he had done for his family and meant it, that might be a different point. But he really didn't say that in the end, did he? We know why he did it.
That is true.
That's your theory.
I'm pretty.
My theory based on my observations of what was written.
Julianne has observed the scientific method appropriately, Nate.
Had to build his empire of narcissism.
You guys come at me with your alternative facts.
This isn't fake news. Stop that now.
Fake news. Hashtag fake news.
Anyway, so about season 4.
Yeah.
Speaking of that episode, Face Off, I believe, is the season finale of season 4, is a great episode. Speaking of that bomb, that was a brilliant piece of directing and highly disgusting when Gus, who apparently has a few more seconds to live, walks out of the room and then the camera...
I mean, that was just dope.
...pans around.
Yeah, but
very Halloween
appropriate. Can we talk about that? Can we really break that down for a second? Yes, it was amazing. It was an amazing, unforgettable moment in that show. How did he have perfect posture, though, walking out? I would have understood if he had stumbled out of there a little bit and then kind of fixed the tie. But he had perfect posture, even walking out of there.
Well, that's originally how it was scripted. It was scripted that, he crawls out and then dies. But Giancarlo Esposito, he improvised that because he's Gus is so in control. And in his last moments, that's what he would cling to through the pain and everything, as he'd be...
Well, plus all your senses would be in that moment. I mean, all your senses are gone. I would assume there would be a whole lot of shock, adrenaline, all that stuff that people experience in those moments. I mean, there's been lots of stories about that, so I can definitely buy that in that moment. Because you see him, the realization, what I actually love is right before that, the realization when he said, "Really, Hector, are you not going to look at me?" The facial expression that he gives when Hector does look him dead on, to me, is more powerful than, even though, you're oh, shh, again, when you see his face and he wanders out of the room. But to me, that moment in itself was, it kind of floored me. I was oh my God, because again, something is going to happen. You know it. And watching his reaction was, to me, the best part of it.
Kylie, can we get an EMT in on the podcast and see, or a doctor, and see if we can just break down the effect of that bomb on Gus? That would be.
If you are a doctor or an EMT and you're listening to this episode, please tweet at us, CPU Podcast. We need some expert testimony, some expert consultancy regarding the viability of a nearly corpseified, blown up person who manages to walk through the pain.
Yeah, it couldn't have been done any other way, though. It's true. It was an excellent.
You also have to remember, he realized what was going to happen, and he started to run away. So he wasn't directly next to it.
He was pretty close, though.
He lost so much of his face. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, he lost a lot of his face. So I think he felt a lot of that explosion.
It probably blew his face off past the point of his nerve endings registering pain, but...
That's what I'm saying. We're quibbling here, but none of us have had our faces blown off, so what the hell do we know?
And I don't want to. Please pass.
He lost a Batman villain's amount of face.
About. Approximately.
Give or take.
I mean, he doesn't have both of his eyes, so maybe more. I'll say there was a brief moment of me being taken out a little bit at seeing that, but I feel like the show up to this point has earned a little leeway, if that's impossible, and I guess we don't really know, so they're pretty accurate with their science up to this point that I'm okay with it.
I'm just going to straight up say that season 4 is my favorite season.
Agreed.
Oh, yeah, it's hot. It's a white hot season, man.
Very hot.
Top to bottom.
I mean, the tension from the first episode all the way up until that bomb goes off, I mean, it never lets up. There's really no lightness this season. I mean, you get little funny moments like Badger and Skinny Pete, but like everything with Walt is just so on edge because you feel the pressure he's under as he's under it.
Yeah, like the most calm Walter White moment this season is where he has the laundry women clean the lab. And he toasts the camera like a real dick.
Yeah.
Like,
This petty little victory he thinks he's getting.
Yeah, he's like, ha, Gus. I
Yeah,
got them to clean this for me.
I got it taken care of, and I didn't have to mop. And what happened to the women? I deported them.
Well, and also the only...
He is an American hero.
Anti-hero.
Walter White.
And keep in mind, that's what they
You
told.
guys keep saying anti-hero. I think he's a straight up villain.
That's what they told Walt.
I'm just trying to mitigate.
Right.
But Gus probably had them killed.
He put them. They went to a beautiful farm upstate where they could run free. And, he killed those women.
I just enjoyed them also training Jesse and manipulating that whole situation. That was enjoyable because you got to see Walt really start to spin out of control because he knew that he was starting to be beat before the whole face-off thing happened. We should backtrack, I feel.
The only other bit of relief we do get this season is, or at least, some glimmer of hope, is Walter and Skylar kind of trying to reconnect, and the initial stages of them trying to buy the car wash. That is the least tense that they are since, early season 3.
Since finding out he had cancer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
All the scenes with Saul and Skylar, I really love because he just has no idea how to handle her at all.
Yes.
Hey, guess what? Kyle likes scenes with Saul.
That's a pairing you wouldn't expect. By this point, you're used to seeing Saul in his element and being on top of everything. But then Skylar, who's new to this world, is just keep constantly putting him down.
I actually don't think that Saul knows how to handle a lot of these people, but he just does a good job of BSing it. And of course, we'll learn his road to that path. But in this particular storyline, he's just funny because he's just trying to navigate the situation as best as you could, being the sleazy slimeball lawyer that he is at that point in his storyline. So it is fascinating to watch. He's saying Skylar, but I think it's the same thing even when he's talking to Walt or Jesse, or even just his relationship with his employees. Like Huel is really funny to me.
They're real criminals. The people, normally, Jesse talks about, this is the guy you go to when you need to get out of jail, or basically, whatever. But it's because he takes on these petty guys, these guys who are nothing. They're just too.
He's a cartel lawyer too, as he said in his first appearance.
Right, but then suddenly he's in the thick of it. He's in how there's major
in the middle of the war.
Yeah, just thrown in there, an ambulance chaser, and forced to defend this cancer-ridden father who brought his family a tankless water heater, might I add again.
Oh, well,
very eco-friendly.
That water heater is reason enough alone.
Everyone's getting hot showers at the White House.
Right.
The White House.
White Pinkman 2024. It's a crazy, Saul, you feel bad for Saul, but deep down he loves it. So, but again, Kylie's just going to cut 2/3 of this episode and just shove that out as the first Saul podcast later on. Or Better Call Saul not in this one.
We'll be covering Better Call Saul in subsequent episodes of this series. And Kyle will be moderating, as was previously mentioned, because he loves it. So Hillary agrees with her eyes. So,
oh, you mean this isn't Breaking Better Call Saul? We're not doing that?
I think my brain would melt, but it's okay. So you all mentioned that season 4 was your favorite. I can't break the tie between 4 and 5 for me. They are the same level of tension, but a different winding of the tension handle, or that's a bad metaphor. I have lost words. It's like the lines are taught in both seasons, but it's coming from different directions. And when I was sitting down to decide which episodes were my favorite, a lot more of them came out of 5 than 4, even though most of them came out of both of those seasons.
I'm totally agree with you, Kylie. I have a really difficult time choosing between favorite episodes in general. I think I even have a harder time figuring out what episodes I don't like. I would go as far as saying there's really not any episodes that I don't enjoy. Maybe there's moments I don't enjoy as much, but I think for me as well, more of my favorites come out of 5 than 4. That's not to say I was not totally invested in season 4, and I think because of the buildup in season 3 with all of the storyline with Gus, it's a really satisfying conclusion to that storyline. And I still do have some favorite moments that come out of season 4, especially like Crawl Space episode I think of. That scene at the end of the episode with Walt just laughing maniacally when he realizes the money isn't there. It's chilling, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, that's the moment when Skylar, who's acclimating to this world surprisingly well, that's like the first pull of the thread that we then see in season 5 of being back to being absolutely terrified of Walt and realizing how deep he is in this world.
Well, yeah, because I think up until that point, and Walt even says it, that Skylar's kind of in like denial land, where she really is believing that it's just like some contract and he is 100% doing it for the family, and he's just going to cook this much and earn this much, and then he's just going to be done. And, you know, because and that's what's helping them rekindle their relationship because she's like, oh, well, it's going to be fine. Like, he's not that deep into it. He really just needed to do it. And then she starts to see as things progress that it's definitely deeper than that. So,
although I will point out to Nate's argument of Walt being a good guy, he wouldn't have killed Gus if Skylar hadn't lost all his money. He would have paid to disappear and they would have had new lives. And a lot of people wouldn't have died. So really, isn't it Skylar the villain?
No.
Losing all their money.
One of you before this night is over.
Skylar is an accessory, but she's not a villain.
So Ted Beneke is the villain.
Jeez.
Walt was kind of throwing little hissies about trying to kill Gus like multiple times. So that was going to happen one way or another. Sure, there were certain events, but that was still going to happen one way or another.
I mean, who hasn't said they want to kill their boss? Am I right? We don't necessarily mean it.
Skylar didn't want to kill her boss. She just wanted to make him afraid, and then he ran away and slipped on the floor and hit his head. There was no killing of the Ted. He had a slip and fall. Okay.
I felt so bad for Kubi and Yule in that scene. They had no idea what to do.
They were enjoyable. I really liked both of them quite a lot. And the comic relief they brought, they were like the adult version of Badger and Skinny Pete. So I was like, I enjoyed when they appeared and brought some levity to the situation. And Huel and Saul were a good counterpoint because one was all talk and the other had a few lines and, you know, got them in real well. So
I just like that part. Although that comes in season 5 when like Huel's just like standing in the doorway of Saul's office, and because it's right before Mike walks in, and Mike's just looking at him. He's just standing there staring at him, breathing funny.
The security guy who like can't get up and is wheezing for air.
So I feel like we should talk about Jesse a little bit because oh geez, his journey at this point is so fraught, with just a brief time in the beginning of season 5 where maybe he's found a little bit of relief, but otherwise he's very put upon over the course of these 2 seasons, starting with his own guilt over Gale, but then just being caught up in Walt's wake, all while trying to, I think he sincerely loves Andrea and Brock and wants to care for them and is trying almost to make them his surrogate family. I mean, there's a real aura of family and who is his family and what does that family do to him. And I think he finally has some sort of safe harbor relief with Andrea and Brock. And then all that stuff happens toward the end of the season, and it kind of careens off the track for him for the rest of the series, with maybe just his finger hanging on to the track for dear life. So there's a lot of Jesse sympathizers out in the interwebs, justice for Jesse and that sort of thing. Talk about Jesse.
His relationship with Mike is really what he needed way back from Walt. It's kind of like what a father figure he needed. So you see him in this tailspin, but as soon as Mike kind of lets him in and is guarded as Mike, as you can see, it means a lot to Jesse. And even though he's doing it for Gus, you can see Mike warming up to him, and it just makes it so much more soul crushing when Mike is killed by Walt, because it's like the better role model gets taken out by the toxic one. In those episodes where Jesse has this purpose and he realizes, okay, I can be in this criminal world like Mike, but I don't have to be the bad guy that I thought I would. He has some hope for his life and that he can turn things.
I think
up until that point, he's been basically just he's been more or less used as a pawn back and forth. He's definitely been used. I mean, yes, even though he still craves that approval, there is that kind of cliche of craving that approval from Walter, but ultimately, a lot of season 4, he is just kind of a ping pong back and forth between Gus and Walt. And Mike is just, yes, he builds that nice side relationship a little bit, but that's ultimately what that was about. And his brain is so back and forth, he can't figure out. And he knows that he's being used, though, to a degree. And it's he also he even starts to wants to believe that working for Gus is also not such a bad thing, because he's like, hey, I'm doing stuff and they're at least kind of treat me nice and not yelling at me every freaking 5 damn minutes. So maybe this isn't so bad. But ultimately, I think Jesse still has some awareness in that he still knows that it's still part of the plan. And then obviously, the crescendo to that is when Walt does poison the kid. So,
well, that's all exactly how it happens. And one of the telling moments is when Gus actually finds him outside of the restaurant while he's smoking. And he basically says, "Why me?" And Gus says, "Because I see things in people." And then he walks away. And even though he knows that Gus has really no good purpose for him, there's this part of him needing the approval, needing the validation that really clings to just even those few words from Gus. And my heart breaks even for him a little bit in that moment, because there's a real, and Aaron Paul is so wonderful in this role that you can actually see on his face what's going on in his brain, but feel off the screen what you reason must be going on in his heart. And that's quite something to pull off for a television performance. There's a lot of good ones out there, but that's one of his best moments in the series for me, was that moment just talking to Gus. It was 30 seconds long, and it was really, really excellent.
I think for me, Jesse is where my heart is in this show, and most of the time my heart breaks is for Jesse in this show. And one of my favorite moments is in the episode after Gus says that he sees something in him, it's Problem Dog, when he's in that 12-step group and he is admitting to what he's done, telling the story of killing Gale. And, you see that guilt come through. Aaron Paul is just absolutely incredible in this show. Everybody's great, but the amount of emotional weight that he carries in that show just really destroys me as I watch him. Yeah. And then shortly after that, that's when Jesse becomes useful to Gusta and Mike as well. It's an interesting arc that Jesse has, particular in season 4.
Yeah, I was thinking long and hard about, because after a while of rewatching shows, I really start to finally, and getting out of the story, I finally start to observe the real technical aspects of the show with cinematography and use of sound and performances. And, you know, this is all obviously highly up for debate, but I would have to say that Aaron Paul, I believe, gives the best range of performances throughout the entirety of the show. Yeah, everyone is great. Almost everyone is very well written and perfectly executed. But just if I were to rank it on sheer performance alone, who stood out the most and who had the most range, and a lot of times maybe who had some really unpredictable choices, I would say Aaron Paul, definitely.
One of my favorite, even though it's super tense, is when he does go to Walter's house to confront him about possibly poisoning Brock, and that whole exchange that he and Walt have at Walt's house where he's accused and he's got the gun in his face, and there's that back and forth, and Walt is kind of playing his chess game with Jesse's head. That whole scene between the two of them is insane.
Yeah. It's the only time Walt is really actually good at lying. Like, when he lies to Skylar, he's so fumbly, but when he lies to Jesse, he's like a method actor.
Well, because he's so desperately, I mean, he doesn't want to lose Jesse. I mean, earlier in the season when, you know, it's like Walter Jr.'s birthday or whatever. And
that scene is so hard to watch.
That scene is so hard to watch when, like, Walt knows that he's kind of lost Jesse a little bit. And, you know, and then he's sitting there, like, crying and kind of having a breakdown because he's like, I messed up and it's Junior's birthday. And he's sitting there like, hey, Dad, it's okay. And, man, it's just, there's just so many moments, and I don't know, in season 4 that, definitely in season 5 too, but that just, they're compelling to me. I can't take my eyes. I don't know, I almost don't even blink.
Is that the episode where Walt Jr. puts him to bed and he says, Good night, Jesse?
Yes.
Oh my God. It's funny because I spent a lot of time watching this show, trying to understand the layers of Walt and Jesse's relationship. And even though some of it's pretty obvious, I don't know that I really reached a full comprehension of that dynamic. And when you watch that episode particularly, it kind of hits it home, but then the fact that he also becomes his target later on in the 5th season, it's just, I have many questions about Walter White, which I'm sure have all been asked, but a lot of it has to do around his relationship with Jesse and his own family, and where that fits, even if we're calling him a sociopath and a narcissist, where all of those cogs fit in that wheel. It's fascinating.
Well, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of season 5, though, is when Jesse tells his story to the DEA agents, and then they know that how much Jesse means to Walt, even though, and Jesse's like, he treats me like crap, like, you know, and they're like, no, he keeps going out on a limb for you, and he doesn't do that for anybody.
Right.
So I just love that moment, because, like, Jesse's in complete disbelief, because he just thinks he's Walt's punching bag.
I mean, he ran over 2 people to save Jesse's life the first time. I mean, it's a real Harley Quinn Joker relationship.
That is true.
That's actually kind of a decent.
That's not a bad analogy.
That's a very accurate comparison.
Oh, Walter.
Really, I think it all goes back to
it
all goes back to Walt's narcissism. Jesse's the son that sees what he does and sees who he really is and still sticks with him. Because in his heart, he knows Flynn will recoil in terror and be disgusted by who his dad really is. But he needs that father-son relationship to convince himself that he's still a good guy.
Right. Someone to look up to him.
Yeah. But really, it's just narcissism. It's pure ego.
And then ego has a name, so Heisenberg, and you're basically, Jesse is Heisenberg's fictional son, if Heisenberg was a separate person from Walter White.
And who's to say it isn't? Motion to dismiss.
Vince Gilligan would say that Walter White and Heisenberg are the same person.
Yeah. Walter White would say
Heisenberg is who he always is. Walter White is the facade.
Yeah. It was a ticking time bomb.
Yes.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I mean, if you look back, because it all started with gray matter. And then the high school chemistry teacher is the best that his brilliant mind can get. and that is well below his mental pay grade, dear friends. Again, motion to dismiss everything bad said about Walter White on this podcast prior to.
Motion denied because...
Yeah, we're going to have to put that to a vote.
You know, speaking of gray matter, didn't he sell that because he was getting married and having a kid?
He left before that, before he met Skylar.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because he was in love with Gretchen, right?
He went on a skiing trip with Gretchen and her millionaire family. And as far as she knows, something set him off. He wouldn't talk to her, and he left the next morning without a word. And then he sold his share of the company. So the implication is her rich family made him feel like he didn't belong with her, and his ego couldn't take it, and he walked.
Oh.
It's all told in one little scene, one little snippet, and you never hear anything else about it. But there's something that happened on that ski trip.
See, that part never, maybe because I was overstimulated by the fact that it was my first time through, but I guess I didn't understand that was the implication.
Yeah.
And some of these things that I know, I own the Blu-rays and every episode's extended. So if you're watching on Netflix, there's a lot of backstory that's getting trimmed out of some of those episodes. That scene might even be trimmed from what you guys are watching on Netflix. Oh. But yeah, there's something with Gretchen's family that set him off. And it was really the first step in his trip towards Heisenberg. Right. And since I mentioned it last podcast too about he takes personality traits from people he gets killed, does anybody know what he took from Gale?
The coffee?
Yes.
I was going to say.
I did notice that. I did notice when he was taking that sip of the coffee, yep.
And then for Gus, it's his car. He replaces his car with the same make and model of unassuming car as Gus Spring.
See, I didn't realize that was Gus's make and model.
And then Mike, he starts drinking the same brand of alcohol that Mike always orders at the bar that Walt never drank. And he starts taking it the same way. Because up until that point, I think he would get faced or on the rocks. And then he starts taking his drinks like Mike did.
Yeah, neat. I noticed that he said that. I literally said out loud to the TV, that's funny. He usually drinks it on the rocks. I didn't realize it was Mike's drink.
I mean, like this show, it's just such an amazing little thing. There's so many little nuances to pick up on that there's no way you'd notice the first time watching it.
It definitely deserves a second watch.
Oh boy.
That's what I was going to say. I was really amazed on my second rewatch how much I picked up on and actually how much my perspective changed, especially in regards to Walt. I think the first time I watched this show, it was right around the time that it had finished. And then since then, there has been such a pop culture iconography around it almost, that the relationship between Jesse and Walt, to me, almost the way that I remember it the first time I watched it is not what I remembered watching it again. And so now, my disgust with Walt has grown, I think, significantly by rewatching it. I want to go back to that mention of what had happened between Gretchen and Walt, because I think you had said that there was an extended episode where there was a little bit more.
Yeah, the Blu-rays or any of the physical copies. I think season 3, 4, and 5, almost every episode is extended by 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So there's quite a bit of material that I'm used to seeing every time I watch it. And then Hillary was watching an episode on Netflix, and I know this scene a million times, and it's with Skylar and Ted Beneke, and for me it goes on for another 10 minutes. And so I was like, okay, so how much is everyone else missing out that I'm just used to now? So if you can track down the uncut or the extended episodes, I really recommend it because it really does flesh out the world.
So
that's what's beautiful about the writing. It doesn't take much of those scenes and the progression of those scenes to tell you a lot about the characters. And I mean, I had a pretty good idea of what happened with Gretchen and Walt, but I didn't know it ran that deep. I just figured he was being egotistical and stupid and lost her somehow.
And it's at that point, Walt so well, you can fill it in yourself.
But that is interesting. I didn't think about when it came to status and class and economic well-being, he takes that very much too hard. And she did grow up very much with a silver spoon in her mouth. So that would make sense.
So is there anything else that we should mention generally about season 4 before we talk about some of our highlight episodes?
We didn't talk about Hank at all.
We didn't talk about Hank. He is spending much of this season, I believe, recovering from being shot.
Very true.
actually that episode, and I don't remember which one it is. I don't know if I've written it down. The episode where he's in bed and he asks Walt to take a look at the case file that his detective, while they're investigating the murder of Gail, and he hands him this case file, and that whole exchange about WW, who could that be? Da-da-da, Walt something, Walter White, and then Bryan Cranston, his delivery is, isn't that something? Like, that's indelibly...
You got me.
Yeah, you got me. That's right. Indelibly printed on my brain. And when it came back around later, I was like, oh boy. I can't wait to talk about when it came back around later.
Well, there's even a point, too, when he decides he's moving back into the house after Skylar's like, I don't want you around me. And he's unpacking things out of his, like, he's got like a box. And then he pulls out Leaves of Grass, and he kind of snickers at it for a second, and then sets it down on the end table, or the night table. It's hilarious.
But it's also, that episode is the beginning of the end, because Hank has given up on Heisenberg. But Walt and his drunken narcissism, and even Skylar's realizing that he's pretty much shooting himself in the foot as he's saying that, your Heisenberg's still out there. And just seeing Hank get that kind of kick that he needs, and that's kind of the moment you realize, like, in this whole season 4, you realize he's never going to give up, no matter how many people don't believe him. That's just the kind of officer he is. And you realize, like, no matter what, there's no avoiding a confrontation between him and Walt at this point. He's never going to give up. They're going to collide, and it's going to be a train wreck.
Yes, very much what you said. Another kind of side note, still that I wanted to touch up on, the progression of the relationship with Hank and Marie in regards to her kleptomania. They didn't even have to have that in there. I mean, they really did, and it wasn't super essential to the plot, but it's such a wonderful way of presenting that character to even show somebody who isn't even involved in that world of the drug trade really still has that bad side. That I love how they show the light and dark of each character in this show.
Oh, yeah. The good people have bad traits, and then a lot of the bad people have good traits. It's just the matter of who has the bigger gulf in between the two.
Well, relativity, here we go. Let's come back full circle.
Why is Marie so purple? What does the purple mean? I mean, I've read some stuff about how, especially Bryan Cranston, who ended up taking on a producer role with this show, how he had a lot of say in his character and chose, like, the color schematic of his costuming when he was, the dowdy chemistry teacher. There was a lot of neutral greens and browns, and he looks very kind of dumpy and frumpy and the clothes that he's wearing. And then as he progresses through Heisenberg and his becoming a crystal meth kingpin, he starts wearing more blacks and blues and snappy ties and things of that nature. But the one thing that I kept noticing was everything around Marie, touching Marie, is purple.
In interviews and stuff, they just joke about it a lot, about how much the budget was on decorating the Schrader's house, because they had to get all that stuff specially made in purple.
Okay.
But they don't go into any deeper meaning other than everything for Marie is purple.
Well, that might be one things that took me out of the show quite a bit was, let's purple too. Why is that purple?
Like, all of her kitchen accessories are like that bottle of wine. Like, even her like wine cork was purple, and like it's just one of her eccentricities.
Yeah, I just figured she was that type.
I mean, I just figured she's almost OCD, and that's just one of her coping mechanisms. And then when that doesn't work, then she resorts to the shoplifting or the going to the real estate houses and lying and creating this whole false story. It's just her way of controlling a world that she can't control.
That's what I was going to say, too. To me, it feels like some sort of sense of control for her that I think adds enough to her character without having to be said, that when you do observe her doing these things, like, creating personas during the open house episode, she's a character that craves control, but she doesn't always have it in her own life.
Yeah. And as a testament to that character, too, is once things start to go out of control in her life, like once Hank knows and she knows, she's a lot stronger than anybody would ever give her credit for, especially watching the first season. And she's like almost unlikable, and you don't like the scenes that she's in. But they do a lot for creating a lot of sympathy for her and respect, which is once again like they show every single character respect. Like everybody gets a good scene.
I agree with that, but I will say that I think of all the characters, Marie is my least favorite at the end of the show. Even though she pulls through and is, Skylar, you're my sister, and there's this tense sort of distance between them after everything that happened. I don't know. I guess Marie and her plight seemed a little bit too B-story for me to, care about her too much, which isn't to say that I didn't appreciate her being there, and I thought she added color, not just purple, but color as in terms of emotional color to the scenes. But in the end, I felt her piece of the puzzle was relatively less interesting compared to the others.
I mean, you didn't feel for her when she found out Hank was dead?
I did feel that, well, yeah, at that point, yeah. But, jeez.
You're a monster.
First of all, that's
Even
season
I-
5, number 1. Number 2.
For shame, Kylie.
There's no Heisenberg here. I'm just telling my honest feelings. Anyway, let's wrap up season 4 and then talk about season 5, which is explosive and was the only one aired in 2 parts. God, I can't imagine waiting almost a year between those things. So,
Yeah.
Well, we did. It was
Especially
great.
right where they cut it off at. Oh my God.
I thought of you both when I finished season 8, and I was like, or episode 8, and I thought, this is where they broke it, and oh my God, would I be mad? So yeah, hey, but season 4, what are some of your favorite episodes in season 4?
Face Off.
Face Off is my favorite of season
I mean,
4.
the first episode, Box
Box
Cutter.
Cutter.
Yeah, Box Cutter's my favorite through and through. I've
mean-
seen it so many times, and especially the ending with Walt switching between playing the big tough and the intellectual tough, and then just being scared completely out of his mind.
And the way it mirrors their reaction to when Tuco beat down his own henchmen. Because they think that they've gotten themselves in a pretty sweet deal, and they're out of that kind of psychotic, rage-filled world, and they realize is all this work they've done, they're in the same spot they've always been.
But worse.
I like the Salute episode, too, where, Gus gets, his revenge. And he takes out Kota.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say Salute. I think
Because
it's my
they-
favorite episode.
Because again, you can say that maybe Gus is the villain, but in certain ways it's kind of yeah,
I mean,
man,
if you
get your
just-
revenge.
I mean, even if you just took Hermanos and Salud, they tell their own story. The beginning and the end.
Those would be my
Well-
second favorite tied, because I see them as 2 halves of one
Right,
piece.
like really yin and yang such. Hermanos is probably my favorite episode of that series, of this one. It's just good storytelling, man.
And I just get a kick out of Don Eladio. He's funny. And you do get more of him.
Yeah. Yeah, that guy is a treat to watch. The only thing I have seen him in, other than this, is Scarface, and so to see him finally playing the big boss, and I'm sure a lot of other people have only seen him in Scarface too, unless you follow his work closely. So to see him go from the side guy to the big tough, is great, and it's such a short period of time you get to see him, but still it doesn't take much of the writing to reveal a lot. So again, it's great.
Nick, what are your favorite season 4 episodes?
Face Off will definitely come up later when we're talking about episodes, but Saludos and Face Off are my top 2 in this season.
That seems pretty unanimous, Alto, with Hermanos, closing the gap. Those were all the 3. So, interesting. But now let's talk about season 5. Season 5 is when it all goes to hell.
That's an exhausting season.
It's yes. It's emotionally and mentally exhausting because Walter White is beyond the point of repair. He's in it, and he's going down as far as he will go. And Jesse is kind of caught in his wake here again. They deal with this Todd who was on Friday Night Lights, okay? He comes along, he's like part of a white supremacist family, and he's trying to they run an exterminator business. It's very confusing, but they need a new meth lab, basically, and they decide, because they've blown up the other one, to cover their tracks with the whole Gus being blown up in the nursing home business. And so what they decide to do is find a front, which is this extermination business that runs kind of a legitimate extermination business, but while they're fumigating houses and under tents, they're going to move into the houses temporarily with a mobile meth lab and make some meth. Of course, a lot of revelations come out in like one constant avalanche after another, which means that Hank eventually figures out that Walter White is his Heisenberg, and Jesse eventually learns that Walt's been playing him the whole time, including poisoning the young kid, and Skylar figures out, well, first of all, she's totally afraid of Walt at this point, as Kyle recently pointed out, and then figures out just how much money he's making, to the point that she brings him to a rental storage facility just to show him the stacks of money and says, I don't think I can launder all of this. And Mike goes in on their temporarily revived meth cooking business, but not for his better self-interest. And there's more. So what did you think about season 5? What do you want to talk about there?
Holy crap.
Holy crap.
Holy crap, yes.
Todd is my most hated character. He's like the worst villain.
That guy's crazy.
There were so many freaking effing red flags with him, like, it kind of makes me mad.
I don't like Lydia either.
Well, you're not supposed to like Lydia. Yeah, so that's the thing, like, yeah, because the Gus thing happens, so then the DEA starts poking around even more and finding the connections to Gus, and Lydia starts to have her little crazy, she's also very eccentric.
Lydia is a 13th hour character that you find out was basically Gus's international...
He appeared earlier, but yeah.
Oh, well, I forgot. She
You need to watch it again.
It's her first time. Give her.
I kept saying, who the F is this Lydia, and why is she obsessed with tea? This was my question.
Oh, she was in it earlier. That's why it's kind of like Game of Thrones in it a little bit.
Oh, no. Well, anyway, I didn't like her very much, but she's like the logistics, she's the global logistics moving the meth overseas woman who apparently was going to help Gus with that international cell, but then Walt and she take up business together, as with Mike and Jesse.
Against Mike's better judgment, as he warns them repeatedly that
because he was ready to pop her and her kids. So
I mean, he tries to tell them, like, she's the worst, she won't betray you, you can't trust her, she's a snake, but Walt thinks he can control everything.
Right.
Well, including Mike. I mean, he even says to, because like, he said, like, Mike's like, I run the business, you cook, and then Saul's like, are you alright with that? He was like, well, he can do his thing, but I'm still the boss of him, so that's what Walt does, you know, because he's a hero.
Right. It's called leadership.
Oh, he's a leader, all right.
This is kind of funny. It's like, as brilliant as this show is, and like you think they had everything planned out and the way everything works out, in all these interviews, Vince Gilligan revealed the only reason this season was split up is because in the pilot he did the machine gun in the trunk and the flash forward. And he thought, oh, I don't know where this is going, but I'll figure it out before the end. And they got like almost halfway through filming and he still hadn't figured out how Walt was going to use the machine gun. So he asked AMC to break up the season so he could figure out a way to use it in the finale. I just always think that that's hilarious because it feels like everything is so well thought out, but really some of these things, they were just throwing them in and they're like, we'll figure it out later.
That's amazing. I mean, one thing, as far as a big general overview of season 5, I mean, yes, Jesus Christ, it is exhausting, but it is so well executed and very well written. The big standout thing for me about season 5 of this show is if they really wanted to, they could have found a way to push it, to string the audience along and keep the money train rolling and just keep the show going. Like, unfortunately, some great shows that have been written end up doing.
Like Walking Dead on the same network.
Oh my God, I know. Great example. That's exactly what. How did you know? Yeah,
it's universally disappointing. That's why.
It started off with brilliance, and they hammered it down to garbage.
Yeah.
Look at Vince Gilligan's answer to that, though. He is continuing it, but he's doing it on his terms. He's not letting non-creative, like, producers do it.
Yeah, and he's focusing on a totally different aspect of this. Not totally different, but a very different side of the story. And it's the same world and it has the same vibe, but it's still not the same tone.
You get the connections, but the tone and the feel of it is completely different. Yeah. So it makes it fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. But the fact that Vince Gilligan decided this is it. However, he may have shelled out a bunch of stuff at the last minute, but he at least knew that he was going to end it. And he was going to try and end it good. And I think that level of respect for the content, the show, and the fans themselves is rare this day and age in television. So that's my big takeaway from season 5 at the end of it all.
The show throughout feels like it's all been planned out from the get-go before they started filming, but I just kept reminding myself that we know that's not true because Jesse was supposed to die at the end of season 1. So
and Mike was supposed to be a side character. Mike wasn't ever supposed to be a main part of the cast either, but they just love the actor.
Goes to show you when you have a smart, probably a nice coercive writing team that you can actually make something like this happen. It doesn't have to be like some other series.
Well, it just goes to show when you have a real creative mind, they take all the input. They bring in an actor for one episode, and he's great, so they keep him. And he just changes his narrative around that. That's what you should. You shouldn't be rigid or try to stick to a formula that you think will make you get viewers. You just go with what's organic, and that's what he does with his shows, and it works. They don't get stale because of it.
Vince Gilligan said he would basically force the writing team to write themselves into a corner, and then they wouldn't leave the room until they wrote themselves out. And he made sure that let's poke as many holes as we can, let's figure this out and find the one solution that there is. That really shows, and that's one of the reasons it brings you to that. You don't know what's going to happen because it took people hours and hours to figure out how to solve this problem.
They barely knew what was going to happen. So it's hard to start sleuthing, or if you watch a Matlock or any other suspenseful show, most of those shows they show you the murder at the beginning. It's for Grandpa. But like any other crime show, where you can try to figure out who the murderer is at the end, even something like Monk will say, there were clues that were laid out just so that you could pick up on it and solve the mystery yourself. On this show, you think you got all the answers, and then it changes the questions, and it just constantly blows your mind. Well, on the first viewing, after you know the ending, it's not as
first viewing. Yeah,
I love what you just said. Yes, that is what happens. You think you found out the answers and they changed the questions. That is the precise description of my viewing experience. And
good job, Nate.
Good job, Nate. Also, yes, I'm glad that they took that time and used a problem-solving approach. Kyle mentioned they threw out formulas. That's exactly... I think in some ways Breaking Bad and some of the other peak TV of the time, throwing out the formulas is basically what gave them and elevated them to what is now being called peak TV. But I love the fact, one of the things that I zero in on is continuity. Whether or not the writers remember what they started off with when they come back around to the end. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that I don't think I have seen another show that has put that much care and has perfectly executed its own continuity outside of Breaking Bad.
Do you think Vince Gilligan's time on the X-Files and seeing how fans will go through things with a fine-tooth comb, he wanted to make sure he did address every little thing?
Did you really even have to ask that question?
Well, I thought it was a point that should be brought up. Maybe I should have brought it up in question form.
Well, let's take, that's one of my talking points, and we're going to take a pause. We'll return to season 5. How many of us, I know at least 4 of us, how many of us watched the X-Files before we watched Breaking Bad?
Oh, easily.
All right.
A long time ago.
Raising your hands.
Yeah,
oh, hey, we're on a podcast and raising our hands.
Kylie has to narrate, because if we all talk at once, no one hears anything.
So 6 out of 7 people raised their hands. Were you aware that Breaking Bad was by one of the main writers of the X-Files? I know Hillary and Kyle and Nick were, and I was. Were you aware that he was one of the main head writers of the X-Files?
I was not.
I was.
Not when I first started watching Breaking Bad, no.
Okay. One of the questions that I have is, because there are some real and when I say files, I mean Philes, X-Files on this panel. 4 of us did our X-Files series retrospective. There's some high love and passion. It marks either our favorite show of all time or is probably in our top 5 somewhere of the 4 of us. Did watching the X-Files influence you to pick up Breaking Bad, or was it Breaking Bad's reputation that influenced you to pick up Breaking Bad, or was it neither?
It was 3 things for me. It was what people were saying about it, combined with I know I enjoy watching Bryan Cranston and then Vince Gilligan being one of my favorite writers on the X-Files. So those 3 things came together and I had to watch it.
Yeah, we were watching Breaking Bad early enough in real time that it was before it was hyped. It was before it really caught on to mainstream and the masses. So it was primarily because he already heard some buzz, and because of Vince Gilligan. I mean, because we already knew. There was already a lot of critical buzz. But, sometimes critical buzz doesn't mean that, yes, the masses have caught on to it. So, yeah.
And also, we wouldn't have Breaking Bad without the episode Drive. He started, if you've seen that episode, the special guest is Bryan Cranston. And they started to spitball the idea for the show together. And then when he developed it and he brought it to AMC, they refused to cast Bryan Cranston because they only knew him from Malcolm in the Middle. He literally locked the executives in a room and made them watch the Drive episode of the X-Files, and that's what convinced them to go through with it as it was conceived, because then they realized, okay, he's not just a comedic actor. He can play somebody you hate, but you still sympathize with. So if you're a Breaking Bad fan, you have to go back and watch that episode. This whole show, that was the genesis of this.
In that episode, he's anti-Semitic, and he has a special ability, which is what, again? I forget.
He just keeps ringing in his ear.
It's their version of Speed.
Mulder has to keep driving him, and because whatever, if they don't stop moving, then his head pops
The pressure in his head will explode if he doesn't go so fast.
But he becomes kind of unlikable. Even though he's going through all the motions in that episode, you sympathize with him, but some of the reactions and things that he does as a result of what he's going through, you start not to like him as a character. So you go through a lot of similar emotions with that character in that one episode that you do with Walter White through the series here. So
yeah, he just assumes Mulder's Jewish and doesn't like that as part of it, and forces him to call him Mr. Krupp or whatever his last name was.
Right.
Yeah, he can be kind of a dick.
Do you recall that episode, those of you who watched the X-Files?
I do not remember that episode. That's why I did not appear on the panel.
Well, that also predates your time a little. It was one of our first panels.
You weren't even born yet.
Absolutely right.
It's worth revisiting, because he starts out as this completely hateable character, but as Mulder is trying to keep him alive, you're kind of rooting for him.
Those sound familiar.
So I guess the question would be, if you were in the reverse, or if you didn't watch enough of the X-Files for it to influence you to watch Breaking Bad, does watching Breaking Bad make you want to go back and watch the X-Files?
Absolutely. Yeah. I honestly did not know to the extent that Vince Gilligan had a hand in X-Files. And I've always been interested. I remember it being on when I was a kid, but I never revisited it. So
he doesn't come around to season 4, I believe, right?
Oh, that's later.
What?
Later.
Vince Gilligan.
He comes in later than season 4?
Oh, Vince, I thought we were talking about Bryan Cranston. Sorry.
No, Vince.
He starts.
That makes more sense.
As far as the X-Files goes, no. I just started Breaking Bad because I don't have any real opinions or critical thinking. I just follow hype trains, so no.
There you go.
No, in all honesty, I have vivid memories of the X-Files terrifying me as a child. So, yes, to finally revisit it as an adult, and I watched a lot of the series, but revisiting it as an adult, and now knowing what I know, especially the Drive episode, yeah, that would definitely be an interesting journey.
For me, I probably would go back, maybe. It's not something, I watched it, I really thought Cancer Man was cool.
He's the hero of the show, I believe.
Well, according to your calculations, that would be correct.
Generally speaking, like I like more of the cop show feel of Breaking Bad, where it's a little more dark and not so much the supernatural spook 'em ups. Like literally, the episode of X-Files was the Immortal Hillbilly Family. That was
Home.
I think it just meant it's like so well known it's become.
Oh.
They played it once on TV and never again.
that disturbed me, and it was a long time ago. Like
it holds up in its disturbingness.
It did what it was supposed to.
And it wasn't a supernatural spook 'em up.
Yeah, I was going to say,
It was the wonders of genetics.
I'm sensing some overgeneralization, but it's okay.
We have some passionate fans.
They are the X-Files, solving X's.
I don't
So
want to...
anyways, some stuff happens in Breaking Bad, and it's pretty real.
Yeah, I didn't want to digress too much, but the correlation between Breaking Bad and the X-Files is high. Because not only was Bryan Cranston one of the convincing pieces with the Drive episode, but Aaron Paul had previously worked with Vince on the X-Files. Dean Norris had previously worked with Vince on the X-Files.
Isn't Tuco in an episode?
Yes,
Tuco was in an episode or two. Yes, so there's a lot of interrelationship, so just throwing that out there.
Vince loves working with people he's worked with before. I mean, I think that's why the idea of Saul appealed to him, because he knew all the cast members would be people he trusted.
But season 5 of Breaking Bad, so the digression train is back on the track.
Magnets.
What?
Magnets. So it's got back on the track.
Okay.
I was with you.
So some really sad stuff happens. Todd shoots a kid in the face.
God, Todd.
We're going to talk about the amazing, cool magnet in the truck and their raid on the police station.
Oh.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite moments. And that's in episode 1, right? Of season 5, the magnets.
And then the funny thing is,
it's Jesse.
It feels like such a fun episode, and like they're like whooping and hollering, but what they did directly gets them caught in the end. They think that they're erasing the footage of them in the lab that the police couldn't access anyway, but really it just makes it so the police find all of Gus's bank accounts, which screws Mike, which then ends up screwing them. So it's just such a fun episode, and when you're watching it, you think, ha, they're so brilliant and it's fun, and then you realize in the long term that they just screwed themselves over.
Yeah, too smart for their own good is definitely a running theme of the show, that's for sure.
They flew too high to the sun. Came crashing back to Earth.
For me, this whole season is really about, not just about, but one of the highlights of this season is the careening collision between Walt and Hank. And you know it's coming, and you feel it coming. Every moment you painfully feel as you watch it, and then when it happens, that whole scene in Hank's garage, oh my gosh. Both chills and nausea was playing in my just watching it. Like I didn't even know how to feel in the moment, because you know you're supposed to hate Walt. He's a dick and he's telling a bunch of spinning stories until he finally gives up. And at the same time, Hank is so on the train of, I got you, damn it, I got you. And also, I can't believe it's you. After all this time.
Well, it's so funny because all of his intuitions, and he's so spot on with everything, but the biggest answer is like smacking him right in the face.
Which they mentioned earlier. There's a whole scene where they talk about, I think it might be Gomi or somebody is talking about how it was right under his nose. Somebody was right under his nose. And you see that play on Hank's face, but he doesn't quite make that arithmetic until he finds the book on the toilet. So, and then it's like, oh,
that damn book.
Yeah, that damn book. That Leaves of Grass. Who's read Leaves of Grass?
I refused.
A long time ago, but
you refused to. Why?
It destroyed Walter White. It was ultimately
Walter White destroyed Walter White.
Maybe we could try to get you Walter White's digits, yo.
Walter White
I'll just say
has
thanks.
expired. He's a dead parrot. He's an ex-parrot.
Or is he?
I don't know. Is he?
The thing too is like Vince actually jokes about that book because he's like, I have no idea when Gale would have given him that. They only cooked together twice before they fired Gale, and then Gale came back bitter at him. But he needed that MacGuffin for Hank to figure it out. So he's like, he's like, well, at some point he quickly wrote it in between those two cooks and gave it to him.
Yeah, or because he just like heaped so much heckin' praise on him.
I was gonna say you can still picture it though, just because Gale was like, yeah,
he was pathetic and weird.
Yeah, he was like sick of being
creepy.
Like comes back from lunch, and he's just like, I bought you this book. Well, here you, and then Walt's just like, thanks.
To my shining star, you weirdo.
I mean, I think it was just the sheer reputation. I mean, if people in the world of chemistry actually respected that level of attention to manufacturing a chemically pure product, he would have been highly regarded. And, Walter was the closest thing to a true peer that Gale had in that world. I mean, I'm sure he felt, not to say that he wasn't a loner and an introvert already, but I'm sure he felt kind of lonely in that world, because he's around hired muscle and, very cold, concise killers and, meticulous thinkers in this big drug strategy empire. Finally, he sees a chemist, just a chemist like him, and that's just kind of how he saw him. So I can see, even though it is weird that he gives him the book that early, I can see why, just strictly on why he would be so emotionally and mentally stricken by Walter's presence and feel like he really admires him.
I see that he looked at Walt more as like getting to hang out with the captain of the football team. He thought Walter White was the coolest guy in town. And he was and here he is right here next to him. Something he probably never had in high school. And so now he gets to sit at the cool kid table. Ultimately, like all cool kids, he has another cool kid shoot him in the face.
Okay. So I have two questions that are percolating to my brain. The first is, Kyle, you were talking about the leaves of grass as the MacGuffin. So is there no more symbolic meaning to that book other than the fact that Walter White and Walt Whitman had the same initials?
I mean, it all goes back to him quoting the learned astronomer in their first episode together. And yeah, that's how he sees Walt. Like, he can study at a university, he could work at a university, or he can work with somebody like Walt, who he considers a true artist. So they were trying to draw it through him quoting that poem in his first appearance. But other than that, they just needed a way for Hank really quick in one season to figure it out, which is why we don't have a scene of Gale ever giving him that book. You just first see him unpacking it.
And it's not in the extras?
No, there is no scene of him giving them that book, because before they killed Gale, they never planned on that being how he got caught.
I'm not going to lie. That disappoints me just a little bit, only because I was hoping there was something more to that Leaves of Grass than what you're just telling me right now.
Well, they wanted to film a flashback, I believe, but that Gale guy's on another show, and he has to have a full beard for that show.
Yeah.
So a flashback didn't work. So then they're just like, okay, it happened at some point that we didn't see.
And then we keep talking about Walt as, a narcissist, and he's a sociopath. But it's funny because when you look at the general collection of people here, quite a few of them are actually sociopaths. Not a lot of them are narcissists, but when you look at like Todd, and you look at like Lydia, and you look at like Gus is a sociopath with a purpose. He knows what he's doing, and he doesn't care because the ends justify the means, and the means justify the ends. So,
I wouldn't really call Gus a sociopath, though. Everything he does because he loved Max. He's kind of the opposite of Walt in that regard. He gave up the life he could have had for one entirely based on revenge for somebody he lost.
Yeah, I would say that Gus is a narcissist more than a sociopath because, his sole path in that business is strictly for his revenge. So at the end of the day, what he really wants is the last laugh.
Yeah, Gus is somebody who's been fighting a war for so long, he's lost himself. Like, that's all he is. He's a tactician. He's a general. He's lost his humanity, not because he is a sociopath, but because his goal was laser focused, that he just let pieces of him go away as he was moving along.
Right.
So here's my next question, which is also going to segue really nicely into some of these last episodes of the series, including the series finale. Are we saying, because thematically, what Breaking Bad is about is choices and what makes good bad and bad good, right? Are we saying, or are we meant to take away, or is that up to the viewer, that Walt was always this guy? It wasn't just a series of circumstances that made him decide somewhere along the way to become this guy.
Walt has always been an ego narcissist, and you get hints about his relationship with his mom and his dad.
Yeah, they mention it. There's lots of touches of implication all
I mean,
throughout.
even Saul picks up on it in a scene in, I think, season 2, when Walt refuses charity when he could have all of his medical bills paid, and Saul goes, "Oh, gee, that's not deep-seated issues." So Walt, he's always been a horrible person, but he's had this facade. He had a facade when he was in university to fit in with his rich roommate, and he had a facade when he was with Gretchen. But underneath, he always had this brimming rage at everybody that thinks they're superior to him. And his life held him back, and his family held him back. And that's why he thrives in this world, is because people see him and they see his potential. So yeah, Walt was never a good guy, which is why Better Call Saul, the show, is the complete opposite, because as you learn, Saul is the opposite. He's all heart.
My personal takeaway.
Hours and hours, but...
Kylie, get your chance, Kylie. Go get your chance.
No, that's how it is. Everyone else in this world is pretty much, we're good people, like Mike and Jesse. And Walt is like the one outlier. He's somebody who found the place that he belongs. And it's this crime empire.
My personal takeaway is that Walt has had that side down in him for his whole life, yes, but that he was never entirely a bad person for the majority of his life. Because I think in the beginning of the show, we see how much of a pushover and how nice he is willing to be. How much of a pushover he can be and how nice he is willing to be to the people, you know, that he's built these relationships with, and trying to live that normal Americana life, you know, taking the crap from the boss and doing your job, taking crap from the wife and being a good husband. And yes, he does want to rebel against that.
I mean, I wouldn't say even if you want to go back and watch the pilot, he doesn't just want to rebel. He hates his boss. He hates all of his students. He hates almost everything about everywhere he is.
That's true.
I don't think it's like he feels underappreciated. I think he never thought he should be there in the first place.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say Walt felt like he missed out on his potential. He has been viewing the numbers for gray matter for however knows how long. Walt really feels like he missed this window of opportunity. And so, you know, when this snapshot of his life that we're looking into now, when this begins, he sees an opportunity to bring that back, of like, what could I have been? And what could I have been with using my intelligence, my genius, for not necessarily the powers of good? He may have been justifying that to himself in some way, but I think he's really acting on that potential that he always knows that he had inside of him, even if it's not for the right reasons anymore.
Look at his petty revenge on Gretchen and Elliot. Like, yeah, he needed to get money to his kids, but you can tell, like, he needed that. Like, when he sees them on the TV downplaying his role in creating that company, he can't handle it because his ego and his vanity, like, that's all he is. He's walking ego.
That's interesting. I guess that is a very good point. I guess I always saw it as a little bit more of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story. I guess I always thought that the cancer really was his breaking point and had him lean towards the dark side, if you will. And that my initial opinion of him was that he solely got in this initially to raise the money because he really thought he was going to die. And then eventually he transitions into, okay, I'm a meth kingpin. This is awesome.
I mean, even look at the beginning, how easily he killed people, though.
Yeah.
And then immediately,
I wouldn't say that was easy. I look very happy to do that.
He doesn't have any grief about it, like what you see with Jesse, when Jesse has to kill Gal. With Walt, he killed Domingo, and he was immediately over it. He didn't care.
Yeah.
That is true. He did get over it very quickly. You're right. He hated it so much in that moment and to the moments leading up to that. But that is a very good point. That I did not think about that. He got over it pretty damn quick.
If you look at that classic meme where they say everybody should get punched in the face, because you're going to realize that once you get punched in the face, it's happened, and it doesn't hurt as much as you think it will. When he kills Domingo, first he's mortified because he's like expecting this like moment of sheer terror that he's killed somebody, but instead it's like this. He's like, oh, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's like he's been almost like impotent his whole life. He has no effect on his world around him. But then he kills this drug dealer, and he finally realizes, like, this is who, like, he's always wanted to be, someone who makes their own destiny.
And honestly, Domingo challenged him because he said he didn't have it in him. And so
he really kind of awakened the beast again a little bit.
Yeah, somebody presuming to know him.
Because there's the footage when he was a teacher, and he's doing the experiments, and all the children are looking at him in his class, and they think the experiments that he's doing in front of the class are so cool. They think that they're so cool. He's getting attention. He's getting a captive audience to see how smart and amazing he is with science, and the kids love it. But when he is washing the wheels of the car of one of his students, and he's on his knees in front of that student, there was the first, that's one of the first hits that kills the facade of Walter White and awakens Heisenberg.
There's an extended scene, you know, he's doing that experiment with the fire early on about how things can be transformed.
Yes.
There's a scene when he's talking to one of his students, and after he's already been fired and stuff, and they mention that experiment, and he goes, and what did you learn from that? And then they're just stare at him blankly, and they're like, fire can be blue? And like, because they didn't learn anything. And then he realizes how worthless his life was as a teacher.
Well, it's where he entertained, but he failed to make them learn. And a failure in Walter's life.
I mean, we're kind of talking about different things, and that's why I raised this question, because there's certainly this aspect to him where he feels like he's been handed the short stick in life, where everybody else is much better, has it much better than him, and he thinks that he deserves, that he's entitled to what is better, while these other people just naturally have it, because he thinks he's so much better. But I guess what I'm still struggling with, and maybe this is a first-time viewer's perspective, I mean, I knew walking into this story that what I was watching was the birth of a villain. I mean, that's in the pop culture. The Walter White character arc, you don't need to watch Breaking Bad to know that who Walter White is. That's how famous Breaking Bad and Walter White have become. But and maybe it's still me processing it, but one of the things that I asked myself, especially in the last half of season 5, because that last half is pure darkness all the way down for Walter White to his possible lowest point. He gets a tiny little rebound in the sense that he gets some self-awareness, and he goes and he makes sure that Jesse gets away from Jack and Todd and all those other dumb guys. And then basically he's ready for death. His cancer has come back. He's made every possible bad choice he can make. He's gotten everybody in trouble. His wife turned a knife on him. He tried to turn a knife on her. Walt Jr. has to intervene. I mean, that was a climactic scene. That whole episode is brilliant. I guess what I left wondering was he really this bad the whole time? Which is probably the hallmark question of the series. And I don't know that I'm convinced that, I mean, I'm convinced that he had potential for it. I don't know that I'm convinced that he just was the whole time. But maybe that's...
I'm always in the camp that he always was this person. Especially like in the moment when he admits it to him. I think he tricked himself into thinking he was a good husband. But even in that finale when he visits Skylar and he tells her, like, I did this for me, I think that's him accepting that this is always who he was too. He's dropping that facade that he ever did anything for his family.
So then, if I could follow that up with a question, I guess basically slightly answering the question as to whether or not he's always been this way. Do you think he would have killed Domingo if Domingo didn't have the piece of plate ready to go to stab him? Or if he hadn't known about that broken piece of plate, do you think he would have let him go?
Because I think that was an excuse for him to finally do it.
But that's what I'm saying.
He convinced himself that he was going to go down there and possibly let him go. But I think when push comes to shove, he was never going to risk his life with Skylar ever being caught. I mean, look at the lengths he goes to when Hank knows who he is, like framing Hank for these horrible crimes. I don't think he would ever do anything that let him get caught, no matter what, even if he had the plate or not.
Even in that early stage of his criminal career, if you will?
I mean, I think when push comes to shove, Walt will always cover Walt's ass.
Good conclusion to draw, honestly.
I think that's
degrees
true.
away from that. I think Devin, you've asked these questions. I think absolutely, much like, I bring it up a lot, but much like any great Batman villain, every Batman villain's story is just like, everything was great until they had one really bad thing happen. They're all respected in their field. They're all kind of okay people, really. And then one day something just snaps. And I think that the day that he got the cancer diagnosis is the snap. But the problem is that these opportunities presented themselves that, you could go left and everything is smooth and nice, or you can open up this door and then there's just more doors and it gets more confusing and dark and scary. And those are the doors he's decided to keep opening from then on. Instead of taking the sane route, he's just this consistent ball of madness that rolls down the hill until it obviously ends up destroying itself.
I think that's where I am, because while I agree that Walt he was a massive potential for everything we saw, there was a definite role of cause and effect in this entire tale. And if it weren't for certain causes, the effects that we saw would probably not have happened. If he had, and I think that's kind of the challenge of the story, if he had...
Well, that's my thing, though. Like, I think he was always a horrible person. Now, if he hadn't gotten his cancer, he probably would have stayed in his little rut and been rotten to his core, but it wouldn't have ever shown. But since the way we brought up was the murder of Domingo, and at that point he was already gone. Like, he was going to go down that bad road no matter what.
Right. Yeah, the ball had started rolling.
Yeah. But I think in the inside he was always rotten ever since before. Just looking at his rage at Gretchen for a slight that never happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I sort of view him as...
He might not have actually been a legit saint. He might have been like the guy you didn't necessarily invite to barbecues, but he wasn't like as big of a bad guy. I mean, to break my character here.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I meant. Like, he's always rotten. He would have been one of those people who quietly hates everybody that is in their life, everyone around them. Never would have said it until he got cancer.
Yeah.
But then once he got cancer, he's like, I'm just going to be who I am.
Hates everybody in the teacher's lounge and just sits there and just silently sips a cup of coffee and just in his mind is like torn them asunder every time, but never said anything. Yeah.
Julianne, what were you saying?
The last part. It's the last season of this show. I can reveal that I don't really wish I was Walter White like I might.
Twist!
I will say though, like, I think the hardest part of this season is how unbearable Walt is in the first half after killing Gus. With everybody, like, his arrogance is just like overflowing. Like, when the scene when he gets up in Saul's face and says, like, we're done when I say we're done.
Yeah,
pretty much getting in Mike's face and the whole speech to Jesse about being in the empire making business.
When he just calls his wife and he's just like, "I've won."
Yeah,
it's like cock move, straight up. Like, didn't need to be done. Oh, Walter, you rascal.
There's lots of passion, and Julianne was trying to say something earlier, and I don't know if even Nick's in the conversation anymore.
No, I just viewed Walt, or I guess the way I perceive it is that Walt was just disengaged with life prior to his cancer diagnosis. Then I do think that that's what kind of shocked him into this behavior. But I almost view him as an observer of his own life, and almost like he's been waiting for an opportunity to use his intelligence either for bad or for good.
Yeah,
something to make an impact.
Yeah, that's kind of where I like the doors analogy from before. I think he always had propensity to open the door to the path he took. And he might have had a lot of self-loathing, and he might have even loathed others. He might have been arrogant and in some ways sort of inwardly hateful. But does that make him always horrible? That's the question that I'm struggling with. And that's the question on the show. What makes someone bad? Is it something that is deeply buried
buried within them a bad seed that just is grown by choices, or is it the choices themselves? And I think it's a good problem and question to ponder on, but that's the question that I'm left with. Like, I knew where Walt was going to go. I didn't know exactly how he was going to get there. I wasn't surprised as I saw it, and yet it was... Shocking is not the right word, but it was deeply disturbing as far as where it went. So, what are some of your favorite season 5 episodes?
The episode, it's terrible to say. It's also going to be on my overall favorites list, but Ozymandias, when Hank dies, the build up to that moment, and just when Hank says to, like, literally made the whole episode for me, but when Hank says to him, you're like the smartest guy that I know, but even you can't even see that he already made his mind up. It was powerful, it was shocking, it was soul crushing, and then it happens.
For relativity's sake, George R.R. Martin thinks that this is the best episode of the series.
Yeah. There's, like you were saying earlier, there's just so much buildup between Walter and Hank, and, you know, it comes to a similar head, and again in the middle of the desert, like it kind of did in previous seasons. It's just...
And the spot where they used to cook, that's where he paid the money.
So, sorry, I just wanted to say something back on that other thing. I just found a quote from Vince Gilligan in an interview. Walter White didn't break, he was always bad. So.
Okay, well, that answers that.
I guess we're not allowed to have interpretations then.
Way to ruin it, Vince.
But the way that it was written still provides great discussion with some ambiguity, but ultimately that's what he was going for. Anyways, Ozymandias is a great episode.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it is truly one of the most heartbreaking and one of the most moving. Out of all of the episodes, easily in the top 5 of one of those, it's so horrible, but you still can't look away no matter what.
And at that point, like, I was so rooting for Hank, even though, like, I knew it was never going to come to a good end with him. But you just want him to win so bad at that point, especially, like, as arrogant as Walt's being. And then just, and Walt dropped, because, like, really the only thing he does try to protect is his family life with Hank. Like, he does like Hank. He does do things that put him out there to protect Hank. And
it's
so, like, watching him
confusing, conflicting
after watching
moments.
after watching him be so unlikable and then beg for Hank's life, even if Hank's spared, he's going to prison no matter what, and he's losing everything no matter what, but he still values Hank. And just watching him break, and there's that beautiful shot of him with his head on the ground, which is exactly like a fallen statue of Alexander the Great, who is Ozymandias. It's one of the most artful episodes there is. And then the pure wrath of Walter not letting Jesse go. He has that option. He can let Jesse go. They don't know where Jesse is. He can let him go, and what's going to happen is going to happen. And then he already knows that Jesse's going to, like, a fate worse than death, but he still has to stop him to tell him that he watched Jane die.
I know. That moment, it's a fascinating juxtaposition where you have him, you can see that he truly does love Hank. Whatever may have happened between them, you're right, he values Hank. But for some reason, that takes a slingshot boomerang back around to Jesse, who up until the point he's shown care for and he's gone out on limbs for. And then he turns the screws. Not once, but twice. Right in a row. And this was already after Jesse went to and agreed to work with Hank because of the realization that Walt had poisoned Brock. So it's like a hat trick of turning screws where Jesse is concerned. And I thought he was a dick before, but at that point, Walter White was gone to me. I didn't care if he got out. I was like, Walter White, you must go to prison.
To me, it's one of those times where, you know, prior to the moment where Hank is shot, Walt still thinks that there's a way for him to, like, talk his way out of this or figure out that this scheme can work where Hank doesn't have to die. And I do love that line that Hank says that was mentioned before about, you're the smartest guy I've ever met, but you're too stupid to know that he's made up his mind 10 minutes ago. This is one of the first times where Walt has to really directly witness the consequences of his actions towards his family for everything he's done right in front of his eyes. And there's no amount of talking that he can get out of that. To me, it's one of the best episodes of television of all time. It's utterly devastating. It's full of heartbreak, but my God, it's just so compelling.
You can tell, like, he doesn't even care that he's losing his money, which at this point is, like, all he cares about. I mean, the whole episode starts with him in a panic about that money. But compared to losing Hank, it's an afterthought.
It's a lot of money.
It is.
It's something he values. It's that status that goes with it. So it's like he doesn't like to get bested, and he just got bested by a bunch of white supremacist hillbillies. And I mean, pretty insulting for an egghead to get bested by hill folk. It's like that's what really got him. Almost like it was almost like this. Like, well, now I'm a good guy because I'm going to take these guys out because they did something to me.
Well, and up until this point, Walt has been dealing with so many people that have these rules or structure. I mean, Gus was so careful with his image and how to protect everything. And this group of guys, Jack's group of guys, just, they don't operate like that. You know, they're total outlaws. They're not operating the same way that Gus is, or even the same way that Lydia is. You know, Walt is just way in over his head at this point.
Yeah, it's like without Jesse or Mike to kind of give him that advice that these are the people you shouldn't be working with. Without that, he sinks himself. Because without their guidance, which he lost himself, he makes all the wrong decisions at the end.
Yeah, it's because those guys were the street brains that he needed to help navigate this world, and he didn't have them anymore. You can be the smartest guy in the world, but you don't know that when you call a bunch of hill folk white supremacists to a party, things are going to go bad quickly.
What?
Well, he told them not to come, man.
Yeah, he disinvited them.
A hillbilly white supremacist in motion stays in motion.
There was a certain inertia.
Yeah. Moral inertia.
You know, obviously, it's been decided what's the best episode. I mean, based on this conversation. I would say, for me, still the most shocking moment has to be, I believe it's the Dead Freight episode and the very end of the episode. I did not, when I first saw that. I had a pretty good feeling when I watched Ozymandias that, you know, Hank was going to not make it. But I did not expect Todd to pull out that gun and shoot that kid when I saw that episode.
No!
Yeah, that whole episode is played like a fun adventure. It's like you never see it coming.
So,
I mean, you're really down.
As a recent first-time viewer, I should have picked up on Breaking Bad's pattern of, we're going to introduce something totally random in a cold open, or it seems random at the time, only to hit you in the face with it somewhere down the line. So the whole episode starts with this cold open of this kid doing and finding a tarantula in the desert, and you're like, why am I watching this kid on a bike with a tarantula? And then he appears as the train goes off. And I'm like, oh no! The kid! Get out of there, kid! And then I don't remember what.
And it's such a pointless death because, like, there's no way that kid had any idea of what they were doing.
No.
Like Mike says, he was just waving at people. Like,
and I actually expected Walt to pop him, and then it turns out to be sociopathic Todd. So.
Yes, Todd is scary.
Red flags.
Yeah, he's a scary character because he's like ridiculously kind, but inherently evil. And if you're playing the Couch Potatoes Unite at-home drinking game, get ready to drink, Better Call Saul really helps solidify. El Camino.
Kyle's gonna be so drunk.
Like alcohol poisoning, yo.
El Camino really helps fill in adds the caramel sauce into the drop cake for the character that is Todd.
Nate's hungry again.
I don't vape tobacco, folks.
No, that's that episode. First of all, one of the best capers I've seen in television. That whole train heist for the methylamine. But yeah,
it's
that poor kid.
It's so fun that they should have been playing like music from Ocean's 11 to the whole thing, just as an homage. Like, you were just like, oh man, this is what they do. They're breaking it down. They're doing he shot that child.
That would have killed the music.
I literally rewound it because I couldn't believe what I saw. I was like, did that just happen? Did I think that was supposed to happen?
My mouth fell open and I went, no.
Yeah, it's one of the few moments of the season where it completely takes you off guard. You know, I mean, the last painful episodes of the series, you're like, yeah, you know, it makes sense it would end this way, and all the misery and death and mayhem that occurs, it's like, yeah, this is going to be the repercussions of these actions. But that particular moment is, in my opinion, the standalone greatest shock of the season.
That episode, I think, is probably... It ties for my favorite of the season with Ozymandias, just because it's such a ride and it's full of such tension, and to see the plan come together. Again, I find myself rooting for them to pull this off, knowing that it's not necessarily the right thing to do. But to witness that big of a heist and to see it come to fruition, and then the way it ends is so shocking. To me, that's just, it encompasses everything that I enjoy about Breaking Bad.
Ozymandias is my favorite, but I have a high of adoration for the series finale. I don't know how many series finales could be considered perfect series finales, and I think there are some series finales that are the best. This has been lauded as the best or one of the best. I can think of two maybe that I like better, but this is the perfect series finale for this show, and is certainly one of the best series finales I've ever seen.
Agreed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to give Nick a bone and say that I think MASH's series finale was better than the one. But MASH had 11 years to earn it.
That was exactly my thought, was that MASH is probably my favorite series finale of all time. This made me think about it. I still ultimately went with MASH, but I was just like, it's a staunch rival. I mean, it's easy to divide into camps on that.
Yeah.
It's that close.
Yeah.
They're pretty different shows, though. So
I was gonna say yeah.
I don't know.
That's like night and day kind of.
Later seasons of MASH, where Alan Alda stepped behind the camera, very dark.
The MASH series finale.
Since we didn't mention it, I will say Mike dying broke me.
Yes, I
But
cried actually.
I love that he kind of had like a cowboy death, where he's sitting there watching the sun go down, and he just tells Walt to shut up because he's going to die on his own terms.
Shut up and let me.
I feel like, as far as Mike goes, that's probably about as happy of an ending as he could get. But it was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time, which is kind of this show's gig. Like,
mostly it's heartbreaking because the only reason he was even around was because of his granddaughter. Did he do some dirty things? Yeah, but he did it all for the right reasons, as an atonement for what he feels responsible. Well, I can't go. That's from a different show.
No spoilers!
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, that would be Better Call Saul.
No spoilers! Drink. So what I'd like...
Have you heard of this show? It's called Better Call Saul.
Drink.
I think I might have heard.
I purposely haven't been mentioning it for like half an hour.
Okay. So now we're going to do a couple of the looking back questions, and then we're going to do our lists. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm not going to ask whether you think this is one of the greatest television shows of all time, because I basically am hearing that you think it is. Is that correct? Okay.
One is nodding. Yes.
It's second behind another show, which won't be named.
Otherwise, you'd have alcohol poisoning. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say that other show wouldn't exist without this show. And go.
That's true. So the first thing is, I think the series finale, I think we would agree, was just up there. We just covered that. So the next question would be, now that time has passed, I've watched it for the first time. I'm not going to answer this question because it's too fresh. But for those of you who have watched it in the past, particularly those of you who watched it live, how do you feel about it now that time has passed? Does it hold up? Was it time for it to go? Would you have watched more seasons, or should it have ended sooner, and why?
I think we already answered this question.
It ended perfectly where it needed to.
It was the right amount of episodes. It was the right amount of seasons. It ended perfectly. Everything about the story. I mean, you can maybe nitpick a couple little things, but as far as a lot of TV shows go, I mean, there's not really much that matches it. And yes, of course, it absolutely holds up. That's why we're doing this podcast.
I mean, even before the spinoffs, the show, even if we hadn't gotten the spinoffs, I would have been so happy with how this show ended, and I still would be rewatching it. Those are just like cherries on the cake. I mean, it's so self-contained and beautiful. You didn't need more. I mean, I'm very thankful we got more.
Oh yeah.
Like, you didn't need it. Like, it's just perfect it wraps up everything. It wraps up every single character. Even I joke about Badger and Skinny Pete, but even with all this stuff going on, they gave them an ending too. Gretchen and Elliot, who we haven't seen in forever, it gave them closure with Walt. I mean, I can't think of a show that's used all these characters in such a brilliant way and then still calls back to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, truly. I was going to say that. Yeah, exactly. Piggybacking off what you said, just the utilization of each character is very impressive, and how the series finale is just wrapped up in a pretty neat bow. I know there was huge debate over whether or not it was good or bad, and a lot of people got pissed off by it a year after it ended, and I finally got around to watching that finale. I was like, why? Why bother with the debate? I mean, you really couldn't have asked for... Of course, it wasn't perfect, but it was... I couldn't think of a better way to end it. Put it like that.
Why were they mad? Because Walt, spoiler, dies?
You know, I think they were just nitpicking at little things. It was just with how they wanted certain characters to be shown and how much care. I think one of the complaints was that they tried to fit like too much into the series finale at once, and I disagree. I don't think there was a wasted moment.
There's always trolls, though.
Right.
It might have been better.
I was gonna say, like, any sort of argument I have with this show is so nitpicky. It would just be me splitting hairs about things. And honestly, most of the beef I would have would be that I didn't see enough. Like, I didn't have enough. And to me, that's not really that bad of a complaint. Like, but I feel like it ended up perfectly where it should have been. I'm rewatching another show right now that I would say has like a near perfect series finale, which is 6 Feet Under. I don't know if you guys have watched that.
We covered it on our podcast.
Oh my god. This is probably the show.
She's like sad face.
I am sad face, yeah. This is like, I think I've watched this show more than I've watched any other show. But I feel this show has a perfect ending, and I feel like Breaking Bad just really has that perfect self-contained pacing of that 5-season series. Like, I'm glad I didn't have any less, and I'm really glad I didn't have too much more as far as the Breaking Bad storyline. This is one of those shows that I measure other shows against in terms of how a complete story is told. I think it is a standard for a reason. I just think it's that good. So I'm happy with the conclusion for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can't picture like Walt dying in a lab is the only ending I can imagine for this show.
Yeah.
And the way he lovingly looks at all the equipment.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like he came back, he's like, it's where it all began. It's like this weird love that he has. It's like, this was the thing that mattered. Which is brought up, it's like the final episode of Cheers.
Also a good series finale.
Norm and Sam are in the bar, and Norm says to, because Sam was supposed to leave, but he ends up staying, and Norm says, we always come back to the ones we love. And Sam says, well, who did I come back to? And Norm says, think about it. Walter came back to the one he loved, his laboratory.
I just want to say how brilliantly we've not talked much about the direction, and I really paid attention to that over the course of this series. Every shot so carefully planned, such good cinematography, such good pacing. We're talking about these final moments of the season, preceding his splay onto the laboratory floor. There is the bloody handprint on the chemical tank with the reflection of the police cars pulling into the driveway there. There aren't many shows that take such careful care with even just the plotting of their visual shots. Breaking Bad, I mean, at least half of every episode was filled to the brim of well-paced, well-plotted visual shots. They just punctuated the moment, and that I noticed that before it happened or as it was happening, and I thought, man, that's just a really good final button to everything that you've watched. I can't think of many more perfect series finales than this.
And the contrast between him laying there and dying and then Jesse accelerating into his new life. They've always been opposite sides of a coin.
Finally driving his own life. as he tears off in that El Camino. ...
Hint, hint, hint. So we've already mentioned the X-Files and Vince Gilligan. Would you follow, and Better Call Saul, drink, would you follow Vince? So let's say Vince Gilligan did something else completely unrelated to those two shows. Would you follow him if he created it?
I would be amazingly stoked if he released something that was totally different from Breaking Bad in that universe. Absolutely.
I get pushback on the creator question, but I'm officially adding Vince Gilligan to my list of people that I would follow, because not only did I watch The X-Files and all of The Lone Gunmen prior to its cancellation, I also watched Battle Creek, which got canceled. I've watched this one, and I'm about to watch Better Call Saul, so I will have officially watched everything he's ever touched. So
there's a really great episode of Community where he acts in it, and I highly recommend that episode.
It's on the list, and I think you put it on there, Kyle, or you're one of them.
Like, honestly, I would love to see something new, but I mean, if you want to open up more doors, I mean, give me a Hank show.
But
you know, as when Hank was coming up as a cop, you don't become a DEA agent overnight. You know, Hank's a good cop. I think it would be. I think the show would be pretty much The Shield. But it would be worth checking out. I mean, I definitely watch it, or you know. But if at this point now, if you heard he was creating something and you didn't give it at least 3 episodes. Why wouldn't you at least check it out? There'd be literally no reason.
Yes, I'd watch something because Vince Gilligan did it.
Thanks, Nick. Way to join the conversation.
And scene.
I'm not going to be the third person talking at the same time. What do you want?
There's passion. There's passion. How would you rate Breaking Bad on a scale of 1 to 5 stars, with 5 being, holy smokes, this is the greatest TV show ever, to 1 star, this is not good TV. They're not going to choose 1 star, people.
We all already said 5.
Yeah, we're 5ers.
5.
I think that's why we're all here. Yeah,
5ers for life.
I have to give it a 5. It's a holy smokes, and you know I don't dole those out very often. So, have you followed the regular cast members, or would you, to other TV projects? They're all very busy, if you haven't noticed.
I mean, if Bob Odenkirk had another project after this, I would love it.
Oh, yeah. I'm a Bob Odenkirk fan through and through.
Bob Odenkirk is currently doing Undone. I don't know what that's on, but that is in his off Better Call Saul production schedule.
I am super jealous right now because I do not have Showtime, and Your Honor, starring Bryan Cranston, is coming out and looks amazing.
I didn't even see that in his upcoming list.
It's definitely him diving into not that Breaking Bad is blue-collar crime necessarily, but a side of blue-collar crime. And I'm sure it's going to be an amazing performance and a wonderful project. I haven't seen, you know who I haven't seen that I've actually been really curious about? I have not seen Dean Norris, Hank Schrader.
He's currently in Claws on TNT, which I am told is a highly hilarious show.
Okay.
I mean, he's
on Superstore.
He's on the spinoff of this show that shan't be named. So that's what he's acting in right now.
As is Giancarlo Esposito, Bob Odenkirk, and Jonathan Banks. By the way, Giancarlo Esposito has 4 current projects. He is working.
The villain in literally everything on TV right now.
He pretty much is. He's all over. Which he deserves it.
Yeah.
Most of the people on this list have projects currently or upcoming, with the notable exceptions of Anna Gunn, Betsy Brandt, and Laura Fraser. Why the women, I don't know. But
come on!
Anna Gunn is going to have a hard time.
Not fair.
I think she got everyone hated her so much in real life for her portrayal.
Anna Gunn, though, she does a lot of voices for video games, so I wouldn't be surprised if she wasn't doing, additional voices and stuff. That's what she did before Breaking Bad.
She was also in Deadwood.
That's cool.
She was also in a little show called Deadwood.
Oh, yeah, I know that show. Yeah, cool. Good deal. She's a great actor. Everyone on that show deserves steady work.
And she was in Broadchurch's remake Grace Point, which was not as good as Broadchurch, but that wasn't her fault.
Thank you.
We already hit that podcast too.
What?
I personally love Aaron Paul as Todd in BoJack Horseman. I don't know if you guys have watched that show,
That is
but
a great role.
It's
yes.
on the list.
After you've watched BoJack Horseman, it's really hard not to hear Todd, like Aaron Paul is Todd in anything, because that character is just so silly.
I noticed Aaron Paul after Breaking Bad did make a couple of weird choices. BoJack Horseman was a good one, obviously.
His movie, though.
Oh my god. Yeah.
The show The Path. Did you guys watch The Path?
I really want to see that. I've heard great things about that show.
I haven't, but it's still on Hulu.
It's weird.
Is it weird? I heard it was weird. No doubt about that.
Yeah. I mean, he's great, but it is weird.
Okay. Interesting. Definitely not going to see Fast and Furious, I can tell you that. Not seeing that.
He's in the 3rd season of Westworld, which I haven't completed yet.
Oh, yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
Sweet.
In Westworld, though, he felt a little bit too much like he was just playing Jesse again.
Wow, spoiler alert, dude.
Yeah, spoiler, dude. Better call Saul, drink. Geez, I don't know if I should ask this question, but, you know, we at the Couch Potatoes Unite do feel a responsibility to our listeners. Geez, panel, would you recommend Breaking Bad to others? Why or why not?
No.
I don't answer for that. Why are we beating a dead horse?
I want it just for everyone who's watched it now. Anyone who hasn't watched it yet, it's too late. It's over.
You had the opportunity and you blew it.
It's still on Netflix.
I was going to say, like, I recommend this with, like, a warning label, because there are just people who will not F with this show.
Actually,
and those people are out pretty fast. Yeah. Like, they're out in season 1, episode 2, basically. Like, the bathtub scene. That's something that comes up a lot.
I've had 5 friends. I was telling them I watched Breaking Bad, and I got that same response. And I said, man, I'm with you. I did not like it. It was horrible, and I had to talk to Hillary and Kyle, and they had to say, just keep going. And that's what I did. That's what I keep trying to tell people. You have to get, I would say, into episodes 4, 5, and 6 of season 1, and then it kind of lands for you.
Exactly. So while I would recommend it, I would say it comes with a warning label, and I don't think it is for everybody. Like, there are just people that are not gonna, like, it's just gonna be too intense for. And honestly, like, if we hadn't been doing this podcast this year, I probably wouldn't have chosen to watch it this year. Just because everything has been so intense this year that, like, I've been finding that in TV shows, I've been going for more like what I would describe as comfort food versus stuff like Breaking Bad. But
I've gone to a lot of comfort shows this year too.
Yeah. And I mean, that being said, like, watching it again, I, like, immediately after we had finished recording about seasons 1 through 3, I blew through 4 and 5. Because for me, like, this show gets to a point where you just can't stop watching. So I immediately binged it, finished it, because it's just that good. And I'll say that up and down to anybody I talk to. You know, it's worth a watch, but there are just people who are going to be like, nope.
Right. I would not suggest this to your nana.
Right.
Here's the thing. I would recommend it. I would recommend it to anybody. I wouldn't assume, because if you just gave me the synopsis of Breaking Bad, and especially the synopsis of Better Call Saul, they're so out of the wheelhouse of the shows I watch. But then for them to be my favorite shows ever, it's amazing. So I don't think I would assume just based on what people normally watch. Because if they were willing to give it a chance, I feel like they would fall in love with it like I did.
I'm the poster child for this very thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of can't handle this crap.
I can't handle this crap. This is, I consider personal.
Literally, she gets so grossed out by stuff, Hillary, and she can't handle things.
Shut up, dynamics.
You're getting called out, yo, but you need to persevere and watch it, because it's just, if you actually want to say that you're open-minded and willing to just give shout-outs to really put together TV, this is it. So
I just want to be given credit for my personal growth in the fact that I did watch it, and it was...
You have to watch the other end of the spectrum, Hannibal. Because if you think this is intense...
Kyle, recruit more members.
is
It's
that
on the
so
list and
violent?
you're the only one. What?
Is
It's at the other end of the spectrum.
Because I'm saying, everyone keeps saying how dark this show is, and this is like lighthearted comedy compared to Hannibal.
I heard that Hannibal was this generation's Dick Van Dyke Show. Was that a bad review? Should I?
No, it's still an accurate review.
So accurate.
Still one of the darkest shows on the planet.
Like the Dick Van Dyke Show was.
Anyway.
I will say the episode of Dick Van Dyke, the Halloween special with the walnuts for thumbs thing, that was terrifying.
Yeah, it might be a walnut. Yeah.
It's time for the lists. It's time for the lists to go.
I already said a lot of my favorite episodes.
Yes.
I'm just gonna quick say my favorites.
Did you do least favorites too?
Here's my thing, and I said this for the X-Files and Friends, I think. That doesn't really compute with me with this show. Like, I mean, I'll just throw out some names of some episodes, but I don't really consider any of these episodes not good by any means.
That's okay. Do the quote-unquote worst ones first, and in the interest of time, because we have covered a lot of them, just give both your lists.
Okay, so, Cancer Man, Season 1, Episode 4. Green Light, Season 3, Episode 4. IFT, Season 3, Episode 3. No Mas, Season 3, Episode 1, I think. And Caballo Sin Nombre, which is a lot of Season 3 episodes, but I have no problem with Season 3. I love Season 3. So this is all just because you made me make a list.
Welcome to Couch Potatoes Unite.
And then, like, my favorites are Ozymandias, Face Off, Salud, Say My Name, which we didn't really talk about Say My Name that much, but holla, and Box Cutter, and just of course the series finale, but we talked about that quite a bit. And then just a random shout out from Season 1, because it really got everything started, but Crazy Handful of Nothing.
I mean, worst episodes, like Hillary said, I don't have any worst. I would just pick 5 episodes from Season 1 because the world wasn't fleshed in yet. Because for me, the show takes off once they introduce Mike, Gus, and Saul, and they fill in the world. So, yeah, I would just say the first 5 episodes as they're slowly building up who Walt is. But like I said, I don't hate those episodes. It's just the world hasn't filled in yet. So, favorite episodes, Better Call Saul, obviously. Hermanos, because of the backstory for Gus Fring. The finale. Face Off is amazing. Box Cutter. Pretty much everything that builds up Gus Fring. Then the episode, I already forgot the name of the title of it, but the one where he gets his revenge on Don Eladio and them.
That's Salud.
Salud, that's it. I knew it was something with an S. Was that 5?
That was more than 5, but you're good.
It's good because actually, Kyle, you and I are pretty parallel with favorites and least favorites. When I was first told about Breaking Bad, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't want this to be Dexter with meth. They were like, no, you need to check this out. And I did, and I wound up falling in love with it. I mean, and not to say that, you know, the first 5 episodes, like you said, are not bad. It's just that it's like that's the slowest boil of the series. Is like before everything really explodes and it's just everywhere and amazing. You have to let the seeds be sown so the plant can grow. But other than that, Kyle nailed it. Also, I liked the Fly episode.
It is a really underrated episode. I will give you that. As far as my least favorites, I would say seasons 10 through 15 of episode 5. Based on the sheer level of misery you have to endure, particularly with Jesse's scenes. One thing I really love about the show that I find rewatching it is I love that balance between the light and the dark. I love how they have incredibly dark moments in the show, and somehow they can still find a way to write in these charming light moments. Seasons 10 through 15 ain't got none of that. Or episodes 10 through 15 ain't got none of that. It's just pure hell at that point, in my opinion. Maybe there are a couple light moments I'm not thinking of right now, but few and far between in those. And then most favorite, in order of the progression of the show, that would be and the bags in the river, which I believe is
Tuco?
It's season 1, episode 2. Or sorry, season 1, episode 3.
Season 1, episode 3, whatever the title of that is. Season 1, episode 3. Grilled from season 2 with being trapped in the desert with Tuco. Box Cutter, Hermanos, and Face Off. Those would be my top 5 favorite.
So I also have a very difficult time choosing least favorites. In fact, I could not choose any least favorite episodes. And I mean, I guess you could say for the sake of setting up everything that happens in the rest of the series, maybe season 1, but even still, It doesn't really count as least favorites. I just have favorite episodes. And I wanted to pick some from like a little bit from early on and a little bit from later on. So as far as like top 5, I love 4 Days Out, which is the episode with Jesse and Walt stuck in the desert. That's one of the most like cinematic episodes. Just love that, the existential conversation they're having in the RV. I love from season 3, it's episode 7, 1 Minute, the episode where Hank is attacked by the twins. Such a tense scene in that episode. I really enjoy that. Salute from season 4. Love that story. I just really enjoyed witnessing this whole other side that like Walt really doesn't observe of the business. Like he has not really seen what these Mexican drug cartel lords, like how they live. So I find that really interesting, but also just Gus's power move in that episode I really enjoyed. Crawl Space, fantastic. And then as far as season 5 goes, I think this makes it 6 episodes, but Blood Money. So that's the episode where Hank has realized who Walt is. Just the tension after that, really enjoy. And then Ozymandias for reasons which we've covered very thoroughly.
All right. I, too, had difficulty picking a bottom 5, but I also know Kylie likes it when we follow the rules. So...
I might. Maybe.
Gray Matter, IFT, No Mas, Cancer Man, Green Light, but it's just such a good show that it's very different with other series when there's like a least favorite episode. And then top 5, Better Call Saul. I think that character, without that character, I don't know if I would have been able to finish this show because I needed that kind of comedic side, but still well written. Like he is a very important character too. And then we've talked about all of these because they're seasons 4 and 5. Salute, Face Off, Ozymandias, and the finale.
I agree that it's hard to pick least favorites, and I basically just looked at a whole episode list and the descriptions by moments and said, I guess these are my least favorite, but I don't know that I have a good argument for that. The best of the worst is Open House, which is season 4, episode 3, then IFT, which is season 3, episode 3, then Down, which is season 2, episode 4. That's when Jesse was real depressed in the second season. It was just hard. I didn't know it was going to get even worse than that. And The Bags in the River, season 1, episode 3, and Cats in the Bag, season 1, episode 2. I know, Devin, you said you liked these, but these were the 2 that I had to push through to actually like the series and keep going, so they rank as my least favorite. Sorry! I'm just being honest! Okay, I have 5 honorable mentions, which I will mention in a moment. My top 5 are, I have a tie at 5, which is Half Measures and Full Measures, the last 2 of season 3, because they were so... I mean, for me, that's when I was, like, now obsessed with the show and needing to watch the rest of it. Like, I was like, oh man, I have to stop here because I won't remember season 4 and 5 by the time we talk about it. Then I have Say My Name, which is season 5, episode 7, Hillary's Right. We barely talked about it, but it is super iconic. If you've never watched Breaking Bad, you know about that episode, and then to actually watch the whole thing in context was pretty rad. Face Off, season 4, episode 13. I have a thing for the season finales generally. Felina, which is the series finale, is at 2nd place. Ozymandias is, of course, number 1 for all the reasons we said. I had honorable mentions because I spent a lot of time trying to decide if I really liked those 5 better than these. So I also mentioned Crazy Handful of Nothing, Better Call Saul, Granite State, which is actually episode 15 of season 5. It's that middle one. I didn't put it in the top 5, but to me, that whole last 3 is a trilogy. It's the saga of the end of the series. Blood Money I also mentioned, and then Hermanos and Salud because of the Gus Fring bookends. If I were to have a top 10, those would be my top 10 because to me, they tell the story a lot in those 10 episodes, even though the whole series is jam-packed. So, listener, do you agree with our lists? Let us know. Send us email, couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com. Find us on social media. Get us at our website. Panel, is there anything that we haven't mentioned about Breaking Bad that you feel you
We
need
might
to
want to
get?
just quick mention where we left Saul off at the end of this series, which will tie into then the other podcast, since we didn't mention how Saul's story ended.
Well, since Kyle's going to moderate the Drink Better Call Saul half of this series, go ahead, Kyle.
Last we see Saul, he's about to disappear with his money because he knows he'll be implicated. He tells Walt, if I'm lucky, I'll be managing a Cinnabon in Omaha.
He does say that.
And then we don't see him again, and then that launches into Better Call Saul.
Is he actually... Okay, don't spoil it. I want to know if there's a Cinnabon.
There is a Gene from Omaha who manages a Cinnabon.
Is there really? Don't spoil it. But seriously, about Breaking Bad, is there anything else we haven't talked about in this comprehensive 4 to 6 hours of podcast about Breaking Bad?
Kylie, I feel like it's one of those things that honestly you could dive in each episode individually and just go really ham on it. So for that sake, I would say we've mentioned what we can at this point.
All we can say.
All that we can say at this point. But man, it's just such a rich show, and I think it's always going to be one worth revisiting. And I think there's always more to be said. But
yeah, there's always a dissection, but yeah.
I mean, you could do a podcast about each character, and they'd have their own long arc that we could talk about for hours. I mean, I think we covered it as best we could, but it's such a deep dive in this kind of dense world.
Maybe one day Back Pocket Productions will launch a Breaking Bad rewatch podcast.
A breaking pod.
I think we'll leave it there because we want to keep the pod whole, because we still have more in this series to cover, which includes the aforementioned El Camino and Drink Again, Better Call Saul. But before we get to there, what I have to do for now is thank Nate, Hillary, Kyle, Devin, Nick, and Julianne for joining me to talk about Breaking Bad. And yes, we could go on for hours. We already have. But why don't we take a break right now? Breaking Bad, and roll the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website, and we're now on Patreon at patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite. If you really love us, pledge your support by becoming one of our United Couch Potatoes as we grow our little sofa-populated corner of the world. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, our Patreon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we have new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and our Patreon to stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, Breaking Bad is available to stream in its entirety on Netflix, our unofficial non-sponsor who hasn't had their people call our people yet. Netflix, I don't know what to do with you. In the meantime, our Breaking Better panel will next reconvene to discuss El Camino, the spin-off movie, in part 3 of this series very shortly. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye-bye. Bye.